And welcome into Hoopsville, where we have a new champion for the 2012-2013 season, Amherst, the men's basketball champions for Division III. I'm Dave McHugh, Pat Coleman and Gordon Mann alongside as we wrap up the game and, of course, the season and, of course, Atlanta here on Hoopsville. A pre-recorded show. We hope you don't mind, but it's a lot easier that way. Lots to cover. You're going to hear from both teams, Mary Hardin-Baylor and Amherst. You'll also hear from Coach Mike DeWitt, the men's committee chair from Ohio Wesleyan. Also hear from Dan Dutcher, Vice President from Division III, kind of a state of Division III here on the show. But first and foremost, let's talk about the championship on Sunday afternoon, where Amherst defeats Mary Hardin-Baylor. And Pat, your reactions first and foremost in a game similar to Cabrini's, where Amherst kind of held Mary Hardin-Baylor most of the second half at arm's length and then finally put it away. Yeah, and in the end, I think that's kind of the way I thought. It certainly is the way I thought it was going to be coming into the game. I thought that Amherst was in a position where they had more talent, and if you give Dave Hixon 2 weeks to prepare for an opponent, I think that's the kind of game you're going to get. You're going to get a game that's very well schemed. It's got very smart players. He's going to have a great game plan, and I was not surprised to see it be, it has ended up being for a double-digit lead for the entire last 11 minutes and 40 seconds or so. From the under 12 timeout to the end of the game, it was a double-digit lead. There were a couple times where it was 5 in the first half, a couple times where it was 4 in the second half. But Mary Hardin-Baylor got on a bit of a run a couple times, but it seemed like Amherst always had the big bucket or the big offensive rebound. Gordon, it was a game, obviously we had great seats for, but really back and forth. Mary Hardin-Baylor kept battling right to the end. They weren't going to give up. They've been known for coming back, and they seem to do that in the second half a lot.
Yeah, they became very aggressive in the second half, Dave. James Allen, in particular, driving the ball a lot to the rim. Asked him about it in the postgame. He said, they weren't playing very good defense on me, so he was going to try and take it to the rim. And, on a day where Kittrick Bell, their All-American, really, really struggled, and you could see at one point he missed a shot and he missed the putback and just put his hands on his head like this as Amherst was going down the floor, as if to say, I can't believe I just missed that twice. They fought very hard, but by the end of the game, they had 15 field goals in the second half. At one point, 10 of their field goals in the second half were layups, and at one point, all they were attempting was layups. They shrunk the court down to about a 4-foot space around the rim. They stopped shooting from outside. And when you're down double digits, if not just not hitting threes, but if you can't stretch the defense out at least a little bit, you really don't leave yourself a lot of space to come back. Yeah, it certainly made it a challenge. And, of course, Pat, it started really at the beginning. Amherst gets out to a 10-0 run, and thanks to a 3 on back-to-back baskets, Mary Hardin-Baylor got back in it, and they seemed to lose that game. Yeah, first of all, I thought Toomey came out and set the tone really well. He hit a 3 right away, kind of served notice that, he was there to play and, he was going to be on his game. And, for the 10 minutes or so, he was in the game in the first half before he sat with the 2 fouls. I thought he played really well. They jumped out to the 10-0 lead, but Mary Hardin-Baylor came back, cut it to 10-5 by the first media timeout. But, to be honest with you, again, it was. I know at one point it was 33-28. There were a couple of 5-point leads in the first half and a couple of 4-point leads in the second half. But that stuff that Gordon's talking about, the shrinking of the offense to this close to the basket kind of thing. Amherst was just doing a fantastic job defending the perimeter. That was really the only place that Mary Hardin-Baylor thought it could go. And, I think Mary Hardin-Baylor had 5 threes over the course of the game, but not really enough to stay in this basketball game. Yeah, a couple of them, it seemed like they could get back into it, but it just didn't spark anything in reality. And, of course, in the first half, high pace for the first half of that half, even most of it. At one point, doing the math, it was about 120-point potential for Amherst College. Of course, they slowed things down, Pat, and really, we'll hear later from Coach Hixon and others. I think there was a worry that they couldn't keep that sustained pressure up, both teams going up and down that court. Well, I really thought coming into this game there was a high potential that this could be a 110-95 game. Both of these teams scored a lot of points in the tournament. Mary Hardin-Baylor proved it was more than willing to run with Concordia, Texas, and Concordia, Texas was really pushing the tempo in their game in the second round of the tournament and also during the regular season and conference tournament games. And Amherst, they scored. They hit triple digits against Plattsburgh, hit triple digits against Cabrini, and for the first 10 minutes of the game, it really seemed like that's where this was headed. And Gordon, what was interesting is the beginning of the game, Mary Hardin-Baylor wasn't playing great defense. Amherst was driving and kicking, getting a lot of open looks on the perimeter that way, and then obviously follow-up rebounds as well. They improved their defense, but then they couldn't convert on the other side, as you've alluded to. Yeah, I mean, they got to the point, Amherst at the start of the game, whether it was Toomey or Williamson, whoever, they would drive, and it was like the players were magnetic. The whole Mary Hardin-Baylor defense would have to collapse, and they were kicking out to open three, so it was just a matter of whether Workman or Killian or whoever was catching the ball was going to make it. By the end, you were right. They were able to collapse out and they were able to stop that, but they weren't ever. One of the things they were not able to do, they weren't able to string together defensive rebounds in a row so that they could put back-to-back baskets together. They got a lot of offensive rebounds, usually off their own misses close to the basket, but they never. They had a couple of runs, but they were really only 4 or 5 points. It was score, miss 3 or score, miss 2. They never had a sustained run because they could never get enough rebounds to build the momentum of some kind of sustained drive.
You'll hear later Coach DeWeese talk about the fact they couldn't even put 4 consecutive offensive series together with points. That certainly was key. But Thomas Orr certainly did his darndest. Gordon mentioned Kittrick Bell didn't exactly have a great game, but Thomas Orr, 24 points. He absolutely put the team on his back, but there's only so much he could do against that Amherst defense.
Yeah, he hit a big 3 at one point in the game. He had an electrifying slam dunk in the first half. That's one of the times where they cut the lead to 5. But, again, there's a lot of things that didn't go right for them. Of all the people, they had 3 guys in double figures, but none of them shot particularly well from the floor. And as Gordon alluded to, if you're not getting rebounds and you're not shooting well, then you're not gonna fuel the scoreboard.
Of course, Amherst 4 or 5 guys in double figures. And Pat, it started in the first half with Workman being a major key to everything, and in the second half it was Williamson who was the one who stepped up and became the guy who basically emphatically put Mary Hardin-Baylor on notice that you're going to have to do a lot of work to get into this.
Yeah, I mentioned Toomey made the first basket of the game, and then he did not have another basket the rest of the first half. He finished 1 for 5 and 4 for 11 on the game. But while he was out of the game for that extended stretch in the first half after picking up foul number 2, I thought Workman did a great job. I thought Kalima did a great job picking up at the point guard position off the bench. I thought Connor Green did a great job. If you think of all the guys who hit long-range baskets, and then Workman, who had a 3 early, and then Williamson was just fantastic today. That's a guy who clearly deserved most outstanding player, although to be honest with you, I could have really seen most outstanding player being shared between him and Workman.
Absolutely.
They both played really well tonight.
Unfortunately, Workman wasn't even on the team, but they had a lot of players to choose from. Toomey was one of the selections. Gordon on Amherst's side, again, they had so many weapons, they had so many opportunities, and everyone was playing well on defense. But I think the big key was Casilla. Early on, he made his presence known that, guess what, you're going to have to come through me on both ends of the court. And while he didn't have a terrific game, he certainly made Mary Hardin-Baylor have to adjust.
Well, what he made them do, Dave, is they had to work so hard on the glass to get anything down. And early on, they went inside to him, and he's such a large body to work around that by the time the Mary Hardin-Baylor forwards worked around him, Workman or Williamson or whoever had sagged down and they blocked a bunch of shots. And I don't know whether it was mental or whether it was deliberate, but Mary Hardin-Baylor really went away from the low post game pretty quickly. I mean, we mentioned the fact that they tried to score a lot around the rim, but it was on guards driving from the perimeter or driving from the top of the key. They didn't look for low post passes, including for Bell, really after the first 4 or 5 minutes, because Casilla, it was such a large body to work around. A couple of times the Mary Hardin-Baylor forwards would drive around him and actually run out of bounds because he was such a large body on the baseline. And Coach DeWeese talked in the post game about the fact that they were used to running against big bodies. We saw Hardin Simmons at the D3 Hoops Classic, and they have a lot of really big tall guys, but Casilla is big. I mean, he is broad.
Very broad.
And he would make a pretty decent tight end or offensive lineman there for the Lord Jeffs. And I think that made a significant difference for Mary Hardin-Baylor.
Yeah, and of course the other thing too for Amherst, again, I alluded to all the weapons. They were deep off their bench today.
Oh, very deep. The thing that most impressed me about Amherst in the 2 games near the end of the season, they could beat you in a variety of ways. It was clear that Toomey likes to push and he likes to shoot. He likes to be very aggressive, as the scouting report said. But he could drive and penetrate and kick. They could score that way. They could try and feed Casilla a little bit to keep teams honest down low. Williamson had an array of moves. Workman has a really good mid-range jumper. They were a very well-balanced team. Despite the fact that in terms of forwards, Casilla is really it in terms of a true low post option. That's not that unusual. At the Division III level, you don't see a lot of teams with multiple low post options. If you've got one, you've probably got one more than 90% of the teams on your schedule.
Absolutely. We'll certainly talk more about the game coming up as we'll hear from both teams again, and we'll kind of recap it again. But let me go back to the atmosphere that was there. 6,200 plus showed up for the Division III game. Total between both games over 14,000. Pat, it was great to see Mary Hardin-Baylor's fans show up and the band show up. Amherst showed up with the best turnout we've seen, including Salem games and et cetera. And it was nice that Georgia Tech was asked to come and play for them. So you had a wonderful college atmosphere in an NBA arena.
It's really fantastic. To be honest with you, I think that if you've listened to us talk about it over the last couple of weeks, we had some kind of uneasy expectations or, weren't really sure what to make of this. I think that we thought if we had 5,000 people show up for this game, that would be kind of the baseline. That would be what we'd expect to see. It was fantastic. To be honest with you, there are some things that we would have to work out as in Division III in order to make this happen on a regular basis, but this has to happen again. We have to figure out a way to do this, and not just because it was a great atmosphere in the arena, and it certainly was. It was fantastic. As you said, both sets of fans showed up. A lot of the coaches and a lot of people who had come for the other games, enough people came to make it worthwhile and improve the atmosphere. But just to hear what the kids said about having a police escort or being introduced at the NCAA tournament, the D1 semifinals on Saturday night, just the way that they felt treated and the way they felt like it was such big time. We got to figure out a way to do this.
We'll certainly talk more about that coming up as well. But even Michigan fans, I saw Louisville fans at the game,
Laker fans.
Some Laker fans. And Gordon, I mean, again, it was just great to sit there courtside and just feel the energy in that building for a game that was competitive despite the score too.
Yeah, and kudos to the Mary Hardin-Baylor fans, particularly their kids who got on the bus and drove a long time. Were very energetic, and kudos to the Amherst fans who, I've seen Amherst at a bunch of Final Fours in various different sports, and it's a small school, and they don't really travel that well. But 2 weeks, extensive alumni network, put it in a big arena, and all those different types of things, we're able to make a draw. And I think one of the other things that has made it special is, as Pat alluded, you didn't get the sense that this was second fiddle at all. I think the PA announcer was the guy for the Atlanta Hawks, and
did the D1 games,
and all the folks here that. This was not an afterthought. This was part of the weekend. And talking with Steve Ulrich, the Centennial Conference Commission, he said, even behind the scenes, this has not been an afterthought the whole way, and it went a long way to making this, for the kids who were able to be here, just a fantastic experience.
Absolutely. And of course, the other great thing was just the NBA arena did not feel large. How they did things to position people where they sat, cordon off a section that obviously would not be used. They made the arena feel smaller and cozier than you would expect it to feel, yet it felt large at the same time with all the crowds. Now, we'll certainly talk more about the experience coming up. When we come back on Hoopsville, we'll talk to Mary Hardin-Baylor. Thomas Orr and Ken DeWeese took time to chat with me after their game, talking about their game, the season, and just the experience here in Atlanta. That's coming up. We also will talk to Amherst coming up as well, and plenty more to come. You're watching Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com. The National Association of Basketball Coaches will be back with plenty more right after this.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.D3Hoops.com.
And welcome back to Hoopsville. Gordon Mann and Pat Coleman will rejoin me in just a few minutes. But first, let's get a chance to listen and hear from the players and coaches who took part in today's championship games. And we start with Mary Hardin-Baylor, who took the time to join us, and we certainly thank them for that. I first got a chance to talk to Coach Ken DeWeese about the game and, of course, the season that was. I'm now joined by Coach Ken DeWeese from Mary Hardin-Baylor, and Coach, an incredible run and really a really competitive game until maybe the end a little bit. Amherst seemed to hold you guys at arm's length just a little bit in that second half.
Yeah, you know, the things that we did were pretty well. We did well. Defensively, we held them to under 40% in the first half. That's what we wanted to do. We're only down by 8. In the second half, they broke loose and scored on us a little bit. We still gave them 42%. I mean, we can defend. The thing that we didn't do early on was rebound defensively. We were at one time we were behind 11 offensive rebounds to theirs, and then we ended up tying them for the end. So defensively and rebounding, we did well. The thing that was uncharacteristic for us today is we had nobody of our top 7 or 8 that had any kind of rhythm offensively that could consistently get the ball in the hole. And I guess it's just because they were trying too hard, or they understood what the whole situation was and wanted it so bad they couldn't get it done. Because, you know, it's like basketball is like golf. If you really want to make that putt, you might not. I mean, you got to relax and make it. And that's just one of those things that just the ball would not go in the hole for us with any consistency at all.
First half started kind of like both teams wanted to play this up pace. Really high scoring up and down the court, certainly lots of steals and certainly lots of fast break opportunities. What did you guys do to slow things down a little bit? Because the second half was certainly different than the first.
Well, because we weren't shooting it well, we thought we would shorten the game a little bit, and if we made 3 or 4 baskets and got a little confidence, I thought if we could just score on 4 consecutive possessions, we were going to turn it loose again. But I thought the way we were playing defensively, I thought our best chance was to get the game in a half-court situation, play well defensively, and rebound it. We never scored. We never scored one time with 4 straight possessions. Had we have done that, we could have gone back to the quick pace, and I think we would have been fine. We had no offensive consistency whatsoever.
Amherst seemed to have some success early on of driving into the lane, kicking it out, getting chances there. Of course, you mentioned the second chance opportunities on the offensive board for them. What did you guys do differently defensively to try and eliminate those opportunities?
In the beginning, we were given too much, and we didn't want this to happen in the beginning, but we were giving them too much penetration. And then when they would kick it out like we knew they would, we were covering out so quickly. We were running past the shooter and giving him a shot. We got that changed. We limited their penetration, but the big thing we did is we covered out better and covered up to the shooter. And they made a whole bunch in a row, and they went for a long time without making one, which helped us out. So our adjustments defensively, Dave, they were just like we always are. I mean, the guys were right there with us and doing what we wanted to do. It goes back to the same old thing. We had no offensive consistency. As well as we were playing defensively, had we had some offensive consistency, I think the game would have been totally different.
Quickly on their defensive side of things, Workman started off the first half really seeming to be a threat. Second half, it was Williamson. It seemed like a pick-your-poison scenario.
Yeah, and both those guys are good, and we kind of controlled one, and one kind of got loose and got him away. We were pointing at Toomey, and I thought we did a pretty good job on him. He got loose for a little bit there toward the end, especially when we were just trying to make things happen and didn't have to point at him anymore. We were trying to get the ball back. But both those 2 guys played well. I have tremendous respect, all the respect in the world for their program. Now, they're national champions. They deserve it. They've won it. And they've got 3 or 4 guys that are really good players. The big guy getting in foul trouble helped us out a little bit. He creates a lot of problems inside around the basket. But they're very good. They're deserving of what they got.
Thomas Orr, 24 points, 11 rebounds, seemed to be the biggest key for you guys. Kittrick Bell seemed to struggle at times. Todd would show up, and then he would struggle a little bit. Was it just basically you didn't have enough weapons really clicking tonight?
Yeah, I don't know what was wrong with Kittrick. He was just terrible offensively, especially. He would get a bunch of rebounds and shoot the ball, hit the backboard, hit the side of the rim.
Yeah.
Very uncharacteristic for him. And Thomas scored, but he didn't shoot. His offense was not consistent. He never went on a 3 or 4 shot in a row thing that he's done for us all year. So we were all inconsistent offensively. Brian Todd, like you said, would play well, and all of a sudden he would start thinking, I'm trying to do too much. I need to back up. When I'm telling him, do more. So I think we were a little bit conflicted offensively, and that just happens sometimes when you want to do something so badly, it just won't work. On the other hand, defensively and rebounding, we were terrific. So it wasn't like our whole game broke down. It was just that offensively we did.
Got to ask, the lights go dim in the first half at one point. Super Bowl references in the Superdome being thrown around. They delay the game slightly to figure out what's going on. They don't really bring the lights back up. What was going on, and what were you told?
Well, I stopped. I got on the floor and told. I said, hey, we got to stop this and see if this is different, because they were letting it go because it made a difference all of a sudden when the way you look at the rim and everything. And of course he said, well, I thought something was different. I was glad to see that. One of those three should have figured that out. But when they stopped it and they said, we're going to play, get it fixed, no, I said, I think we ought to play. And then Dave said, of course we're going to. But we both agreed that if the lights came back on and were bright again, we had to stop it again to readjust to that. So there was a little problem there for a while. But the guys adjusted in a very short period of time. Didn't bother them that much.
What's it like to play an arena like this for a program, any Division III program for sure, but for your program especially, to get this spotlight, this arena, etc.?
Well, if you don't mind, I just said in the post-game media thing, I said, if you don't mind me getting on a soapbox, I need to do it. The NCAA people and the city of Atlanta have been so good to us. And I'm sure it's not just us. That means the other Division III team, Amherst, the two Division II schools. If we don't take advantage of this and make this a permanent thing, we are really and truly, in my opinion, we're really slighting the student athlete. This is the best experience a college basketball player can have. There's nothing like the Final Four around the world. This is world-class experience. And it's something that the NCAA always says, we as members always say, we want the best experience for college athletes. There can be no better experience than this for Division II and Division III athletes. The way the people of the NCAA have treated us and the city of Atlanta, regardless where the Final Four is, this is outstanding. The guys involved in this will never have another experience athletically ever again in their lives. This is a way to do it.
You and I have talked a lot over the last few weeks about this run for your program. What does this mean to you now that it's officially over? What does this run mean to you, the program, the school, etc.?
No, the way that our guys handled so much adversity, losing our two big guys before the season ever begins, the trip to Washington, coming back, going to Trinity, and then 8 games out of 10 in January, and they continued to win and do things. Then we have a 2-week bye, the first round of the tournament. We turn around, had to play Concordia again for the 4th time. And Concordia is very good. Our league is good. Then we have to go to Whitworth. Then we end up at Salem playing number 11 and number 1. It's not something that I said at the beginning of the year. These guys we got a chance to go to Atlanta. We said we want to work for it, of course, like everybody else was. I have the utmost respect for our individual players and as a team. They like each other so much. It's a very unusual, a very unique bunch of guys. I've been doing this a long time. I actually get emotional talking about those guys. When somebody says to me something about young people today are a little bit confusing, I just say, I don't know who you're working with, but if you have any questions about the youth of America, come work with me. I think the youth of America is well and good and very strong.
Well, congratulations on a terrific run. You know I always give you the last word. Any final thoughts you want to share with the fans, etc., that may be tuning in?
How good were the fans from MHB? I mean, there were so many people there, many buses. I thought there was a great crowd. Yeah. You had said earlier you wanted 5,000 or 6,000 or something. I don't know what we had, but
over 7.
Okay. That's another testament. UMHB fans were here and helped it, and what a great supporting group of people we have. But it's the whole experience, and I think you have mentioned it many times, and you are right, Dave. This is the way to do this, and the people have supported it.
Very good. Well, congratulations on a terrific run. Sorry about the loss, but I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Ken DeWeese from Mary Hardin-Baylor. Once again, thanks to Coach Ken DeWeese, and congratulations to him and his staff on a terrific run for the Crusaders. Next up, Thomas Orr got a chance to chat with me, and while it may not be the way he wanted his senior season to end, he certainly took the time to be gracious enough to join us and gave us his thoughts on the season as well. Now joined by Mary Hardin-Baylor's Thomas Orr after the championship game. First and foremost, Thomas, thanks for taking the time after a tough loss, I know, to join me. You guys got here by fighting in every single game, and despite the score, you guys seemed to fight right to the end. Was there ever a point that you thought you couldn't come back?
We never really thought that we couldn't come back. I guess when it hits final, when the buzzer went off, that's when I kind of realized that there's no more time left. So other than that, I thought until the final buzzer goes off, that we'll be able to win.
24 points, 11 rebounds. You seemed at points to try and will your team back into it, whether it was drives to the basket, kickouts, firing into the layups, or even hitting big threes from outside. You seem to be trying to do a lot of different things.
Oh, yeah. When my team gets stagnant, we kind of stand around. So I just want to be aggressive and let my team know that we're not going to get around. We're not going to be able to come back if we all just stand around and shoot jump shots. So I tried to just kickstart us by being aggressive, and hopefully my team could catch on, which we did, but shots just wouldn't fall today. So
the game started off pretty high-paced. Both teams going up and down the court, slam dunks, and really pressure defense to create turnovers. But it seemed in the second half things slowed down. What was your guys' mentality coming into the second half to try and slow down Amherst?
Well, we needed to rebound, so we tried to get into half-court defense. We know that they're pretty good executing the offense, but we guarded them pretty well, I feel like, until the end of the shot clock. But then we just didn't finish the play like our coach preached to us every day in practice, to finish the play. But we just couldn't do that today. So they're extremely active on the boards, and that really wins games for teams, and as it shows today.
I was going to say, what was Amherst doing that you guys struggled with throughout the game, or just in parts?
Just offensive rebounding on their side, our defensive rebound. But I think we had a good game plan, and I feel like we were well scouted them. We just didn't finish the play. I think if we would have rebounded and closed out on shooters properly, we over closed out a lot. So I think we had fundamental breakdowns a lot. So they executed and they took advantage of our breakdowns, and I think that's what won the game.
On a lighter note, the lights dim out on us a little bit there in the first half. Everybody throwing around Super Bowl references. What was your guys' reaction when the lights initially went out and then they stopped the game briefly to try and figure things out?
Well, at first I thought they were going to stop it a lot sooner than they did, but they didn't. They kept letting us play for a little bit. So we weren't really thinking, we were just trying to stay focused on the game. We were down at the point, so that kind of gave us the time to regroup and talk to our coach for a little bit to try to get back on track. So we used it as a mini timeout.
You guys had an amazing run. You lose to Concordia, Texas in the conference championship game. Everyone says that bye gave you guys a chance to regroup and really reform, and you make this run all the way to Atlanta. When you look back on that run and what you guys were able to do this season, I assume you're going to look back on it with fond memories despite this tough loss. Yeah,
it was a great season. We really bonded together throughout the season, not just the conference tournament loss. Just throughout the whole season, we really bonded together to get to this point. So this whole run was a great memory for me. I'm really going to take a lot of memories back, but I wish I could take back a championship with me, but unfortunately I can't do that.
And finally, the experience in Atlanta. I know they treated you guys just as well as they treat the D1 guys. You're introduced at the D1 games on Saturday night. You guys get the full treatment of VIP. Looking back, how cool or how fun was that?
It was really cool. Not too many people get to go to the Final Four. So being able to do that and get introduced in front of so many people, it was an awesome experience, and I'll always remember that part as well as the game itself.
And finally, as I wrap up here, I always give my guests the final word. Anything you want to say to your fans or anybody else who may be tuning in?
I just want to say thank you for all the supporters that came out, even the ones back home that watched on TV or at the theaters back in Belton. I want to thank the coaches for giving me the opportunity to play here and represent University of Mary Hardin-Baylor. And I just want to thank my teammates for helping me secure a legendary road trip for me. As a journeyman, it's hard to find a home, and I really found one with a group of guys that I really appreciate.
Congratulations on a great season again, Thomas Orr. 24 points, 11 boards in the championship game despite the loss. A great season for Mary Hardin-Baylor.
Thank you.
And once again, thanks Thomas Orr for joining me to talk about the season, and congratulations on a terrific career for him. When we come back on Hoopsville, we'll switch gears and talk to the champions, Amherst. And of course, that means Aaron Toomey will join us along with Alan Williamson as well, and upcoming also Dave Hixon. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We'll be back right after this.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things, not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Welcome back to Hoopsville, again in Atlanta for the Final Four and, of course, the Division III championship game. You've heard from Gordon Mann and Pat Coleman. They'll come up again later in the broadcast. But we also heard from Mary Hardin-Baylor, and we appreciate them taking the time to do that after such a challenging and disappointing loss. Next up, the champions, Amherst, and I got a chance to chat with them. And we started with the junior who played a pretty good game despite having foul trouble, and I chatted with Aaron Toomey right after the win. Now joined by Aaron Toomey from the Amherst Lord Jeffs, national champions, and first and foremost, congratulations on the championship.
Thank you very much.
An interesting run to get to this one, and you had another team that certainly seemed to be willing to play your game early on. Did you guys were you surprised by that, or were you almost expecting it?
We were kind of expecting it. Mary Hardin-Baylor is an up-tempo team. They like to get out and score the ball, so we knew that's kind of what they were going to come in playing, and we enjoy playing that way too, so it worked out for both of us, I guess.
Of course, you got in foul trouble, 2 fouls, about midway through that first half. How good did it feel, though, to sit on the bench and see your team still playing really well without basically their floor leader?
Yeah, David Kalima is an incredible player. I know I'm frustrated when I go out with foul trouble, but at the same time, I know we're in great hands. David's really grown the last couple of years, and he's a great player. He's tough to guard and makes good decisions. So, as I'm frustrated on the bench, in the back of my mind, I know we're in great hands with David.
Of course, you're also banged up a little bit, had a taped up fingers on your left hand, luckily not your right. But second half, you even had to sit just a little bit. Is it tough to get back in a rhythm in those scenarios?
A little bit, but coming out of halftime, I knew I had to get warmed back up and get some shots up. And, it's a national championship game. There's no excuses here.
And you guys started off on a fast pace. So did Mary Hardin-Baylor. At one point, we noticed you guys could have scored 120 if we kept that pace up. What changed? What did you guys do differently at halftime in the second half to really slow down the pace?
In halftime, Coach really stressed that we need to get good looks at the basket. He said we were forcing some stuff early with the fast pace, and we came out, we tried to slow it down just a little bit. We wanted to take advantage of our fast break opportunities, but at the same time make sure we got a good look every time down. So that's why we slowed down a little bit, and once the game got towards the end and we had the lead, we just wanted to milk a little bit of the clock.
I know you guys had a good lead, 14 some odd points, and then obviously grew from there. But were you ever thinking in the back of your mind, that's not good enough? This Mary Hardin-Baylor team can respond?
Yeah, everybody's seen it the last couple games. Mary Hardin-Baylor's been down, and they've stormed back in the last couple minutes, and we kept telling each other that it's their time. This is when they come back. This is when they come back. So we couldn't let them do that, and we really came together as 5 guys on the court and played defense and rebounded really well towards the end.
When did it sink in that you guys were going to win this championship?
To be honest, I don't know if it still hasn't sunk in. It was an incredible game, and it's an incredible feeling just to celebrate with my teammates and my players or my coaches, but to be honest, it hasn't really sunk in yet.
Talk about the senior captains, obviously, on this squad. Workman in the first half certainly seemed to be a big key. Williamson in the second half was a big key. And, of course, Casilla inside was playing pretty well. Give me your sense as a junior seeing these 3 captains win a championship.
They're an incredible trio of senior captains. Willie's been the heart and soul of this team for the whole season and really got us into each and every game. When we're struggling, he comes up and makes a big play for us. And Alan, and this postseason. He struggled a little bit during the regular season, but in the postseason he really stepped up, and really his numbers just went sky high with rebounds and points, and really gave us a big lift in the postseason. And Peter's a huge guy, tough to guard inside, and that gives us a great advantage over most teams. And I can't say enough about the three of them, just getting us together as a team, getting us ready for each and every game. And if it weren't for those three and the way they controlled the locker room, we definitely wouldn't be standing here today.
You guys hit a big stumbling block early in this season. It was a gut check. You talked about it before, but what was it that got you guys back on track and running to this national championship?
It's really just those three seniors. They brought us into a players-only meeting after our second loss there early in the season. They said, "This isn't how we're going to go out as seniors. This isn't how the season's going to end." So we kind of came together around them, and we beat Brandeis, who's a great team, and at that point we realized we have something special if we can just keep it going. And thankfully we reeled off 24 straight, and now we're here with national champions.
You seem to have adjusted your game at one point this season. What was the trigger to adjust that game? What was said? What did you do differently?
I have so many great players around me. They count on me to score the ball some, but I also count on them to pick me up when I'm not doing that. And I think at some point during the season I realized that I don't have to force stuff, even though I do some here and there still, but I have so many guys like Allen, Willie, Pete, Tom, Connor Green, Ben Pollock. They step up and make huge plays for us. And, I just realized that I have so many great guys around me. I just got to take advantage of it.
The other thing, you guys have this nice 24-game winning streak to get a national championship, but was there a game this season that kind of felt like the trigger or the crossing point or the one that really got you guys rolling?
Well, I think there's two. The Brandeis game after we lost that second one was a big one for us. We knew they were a very good team, and we had to come out and we had to get a win. That was a basically must-win for us to get our season back on track. And then, of course, the Middlebury game up in Middlebury was just the way we won that, to know we were up 15 or 17 or something, and they fought back and they played, just to know that we can grind out a game and just win in any circumstances. I think that was really a big win for us too.
Of course, this experience in Atlanta, you guys get introduced to the crowd at the D1. You flash a Syracuse jersey. Not sure if you jinxed them, but what's been the experience like here in Atlanta?
It's been incredible. I've been telling the guys it's a good year to have a good season. Get down here to Atlanta on the big stage and under the bright lights that weren't so bright in the second half, but it's been an incredible experience. Just to come down here with this group of guys. I couldn't ask for better teammates and better coaches. So it's been unbelievable.
Amherst has had a little bit of a lull there without getting to the Final Four in Salem, and obviously winning a national championship. What does this mean to the program, the school, etc.?
It means a lot. Just to get back on track and being a national power. We had one year, the year before I came in, they struggled a lot, and we had to get it back on track because everybody out there expects Amherst to be at the top every year. And our mindset was to get back to the top. We had 2 good seasons where we made it to the Elite 8 and then the Sweet 16, but we weren't satisfied with that. We wanted to get really down to Salem, but this year down to Atlanta, and just show everybody that we're still nationally, we're still a powerhouse.
Aaron Toomey, 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. I always give my guests the final word. Anything you want to share to anybody watching, especially from Amherst?
I just want to thank all the fans that were here tonight. They were incredible. They were loud. They picked us up when we were struggling. I also want to give a shout out to my grandma who passed away 1 year ago today. She was my biggest fan, and I know she's watching over me today, and I know she's proud.
Well, congratulations on the national championship. We'll look forward to having you come back next year to have one more year in the Lord Jeff's uniform.
Let's hope so. Thank you.
Absolutely. An emotional day for Aaron Toomey. A year after his grandmother dies, he wins a national championship with the net hung around his neck. Congratulations to him. Alan Williamson also took the time to chat with us. He certainly made his presence known throughout the tournament and even at the end of the season, to be sure, and he certainly made an emphatic statement in the second half of this one. Here's what Alan had to say to me after the championship. Now joined by Alan Williamson, and first and foremost, congratulations on the national championship.
Thanks a lot, sir. Feels great right now. It's a great way to end the career. Really the pinnacle of my athletic career so far, and there's no better way to go out as a senior than in Atlanta, playing in the Hawks Arena and winning a national championship.
Led the team with 18 points. Of course, you guys had a lot of guys in double figures. Really seemed like a team effort because early in the first half it was Workman and some other guys. In the second half it was yourself and other guys.
Yeah, that's what makes us a great team is we have different guys who can bring different things to the table. Green stepped up and hit some big threes for us. Kalema is great, getting to the rack. Willie was great, working his little up fake and step throughs. Toomey hit some big shots. Big Pete was just such a presence. They had to put so much emphasis on trying to stop him and not give him easy looks, so that really opened up stuff for the rest of us. But that's what we've been doing all year. When one guy isn't really shooting well, another guy steps up, so we had a lot of different options going, and fortunately a lot of the balls fell through for us today.
You guys started with Mary Hardin-Baylor in a high-paced game, back and forth, up and down the court, certainly high-scoring affair. Did you feel you could keep playing at that pace, or did you have to make a change?
We thought we could keep playing at that. It's the last game of the season, you know. Yeah. So we had everything we had in the tank. We were going to leave out there, and we had this last 2 weeks to really focus on conditioning. So I think we had our legs. We were rested, but they do play a really fast tempo game. So we had to really focus on stopping them in transition. But I think we did a good job of that.
Second half, you really stepped up and really made our presence known. There was one sequence where you hustled with Thomas Orr, got the rebound, slammed it home. Seemed like a statement.
Yeah, it was my last half of basketball in my Amherst jersey, and I really wanted to make sure I gave it everything I got. And I know that I'm an effective offensive rebounder, so I stayed hard on the boards, and once I got under the hoop, I was going up with that.
Were you guys surprised, especially early on, that you had that much success on the offensive boards?
Yeah, going in, we knew they were a really, really strong rebounding team, both offensively and defensively. So that was something that we really focused on, especially on defense. We really had to get a body on them and keep them off their old glass. But we are really good rebounders as well. Willie, myself, and Pete are really aggressive on the old boards, so that was just natural. We just got to stay aggressive, and we did, and got our hands on some good offensive boards.
What's it mean to be named Most Outstanding Player for a national championship that was played in Atlanta?
Feels incredible. I really put it on myself to kind of step my game up this postseason, and it really paid off. I didn't want my career to end, and I didn't want this group of guys to go out without being on top, because we were really close group, and I wanted everyone to experience this win along with me, and fortunately we pulled it out.
You had a couple great highlights this year. One of them was the block on Williams to win the NESCAC title. The other block in the semifinal to ice the game against North Central. Couple, or at least that one nice slam here tonight. Any of them stand out as going to be the one, or is it a group of them, or is there one that we're not thinking of?
Yeah, that Williams game for the NESCAC championship, that final block was I'm really going to remember that one for a long time. But there was also an alley-oop earlier in that game, in that Williams game, where I came off a high screen and I came off the loop and Toomey threw it up. And it was kind of a bad pass, but bad passes actually make for better alley-oops. So I kind of caught it like this and then put it down. So
did you tell him it was a bad pass?
Oh, he knew it, yeah. He knew it, but I thanked him because it made it look better.
With the experience here for Atlanta, I know everybody's been talking about it, the introductions at the D1 games, the treatment you guys have had. Did you expect what you got?
Yeah, this weekend has been unreal. Once in a lifetime opportunity for all the guys here. It's just great that it happened to be the 75th anniversary of my senior year, so I could really experience all this. It was just an unbelievable opportunity, and myself and the other two seniors really wanted to maximize the opportunity that we were dished, so we're really happy that we pulled it out.
What's it mean to give Amherst another national championship?
It means a lot. It means a lot. We got two guys on the assistant coaching staff who won it in 07.
Yep.
So they've been talking about it since they've been here, you know. So we really wanted to go out and get another one. I know that me and Willie and Pete, when we were freshmen, we were like, yo, we got a team, we got a squad, let's go get a championship. And we fell short 3 times. So we really put it on ourselves to lead the team through this tournament run, and we won 24 straight. That's a school record also. So we really sealed the legacy, I think.
And finally, the lights dimmed a little bit here at the building. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
My first reaction was it's gonna be the Super Bowl over again. Yeah, we didn't really know what to expect. I thought the ref would blow the whistle or something and try to get the light back on. But the lights were so bright in the beginning anyways that it didn't even make that much of a difference. It was still, we could see fine and everything. I don't even know if they ended up turning it back on.
Yeah, they came on eventually in the second half.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, we were just so focused on the game, we didn't really care about all the other stuff.
your final game as a senior, playing for a national championship in an NBA arena with 7,000 fans screaming loud. I suspect this is one you'll never forget.
Yeah, I really couldn't have scripted it up better myself if I tried. As I said, it's been an unbelievable opportunity, and I'm just really fortunate. I'm really glad that these guys all stuck together and we pulled it out.
Well, congratulations on a national championship. I always give you, the guest, the final word. Anything you want to say to those who may be tuning in, especially from Amherst?
Yeah, shout out to my boys. What's up, Rashard? What's up, Landris? What's up, Spencer Noon? All the guys who, Tolman, all the guys who stuck with AC13. We did it for you guys, all right? All the fans back there, thank you. You guys are the best.
Congratulations, Aaron Williamson, national champion and most outstanding player for Amherst. So once again, congratulations to Aaron Williamson and, of course, the rest of the senior class at Amherst who go out as champions the way they wanted to go out. And, of course, doing it under the spotlight in Atlanta makes it just all that much more sweeter. When we come back on Hoopsville, I chat with Dave Hixon about the title and, of course, all the notoriety that goes with it. And, of course, maybe getting a little pressure lifted off of his shoulders. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We'll be back right after this.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
And welcome back to Hoopsville here in Atlanta, Georgia, on the night of the championship for Division III. We have heard from the players of Amherst College, and now we get a chance to hear from head coach Dave Hixon, who talked about how important and how meaningful this championship is and why his plans in Atlanta, though, still a little bit busy. Now joined by Dave Hixon, head coach for the national champion Amherst Lord Jeffs. First and foremost, congratulations.
Thanks. It's a little surreal right now, but it's unbelievable. It's great stuff.
You guys haven't won one since 07. You and I talked about how no senior class had gotten even to Salem, or this senior class, I should say. Been a long time, so kind of a little bit fresh. May have played into your hand a little bit.
Yeah, you know, it's really hard. And I listened to Steve Lapis last night was talking about that people just don't understand how hard it is to get here, but then how hard it is to win. And so I'm delighted.
We knew both teams could go high pace. We knew it could be up-tempo. That first half started very up-tempo. At one point, we predicted it would be about 120 points if it stayed at this pace. Was that comfortable for you? Did you want to stay at that pace, or did you feel you had to slow things down a little bit?
Well, I thought we had to slow things down a little bit. When we're running, we can run well. We can't run for 40 minutes, and they can. The great news is we only turned the ball over 6 times, and I think that they run so well. When they stole the ball, it was off to the races. Their offensive rebounding, but certainly the transition game for them off steals. As long as we're scoring, they don't run.
You guys had different guys step up during the season. You had different guys step up during this game. It started with Workman. It finished with Williamson. Toomey had a decent night. You had other guys who hit key shots. It looked like you almost had too many weapons.
Never too many weapons. Never too many weapons. But I have to tell you, Tom Killian hit a big 3 for us. Everybody chipped in. I mean, it was a great team effort, and like you said, it happened all year long, and it happened all in one game tonight.
Another championship for Amherst, certainly. I know you've been striving towards this. I know Amherst has had a very high-level expectation. Is this finally kind of a relief, maybe, to get another championship after coming so close?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's really interesting. You know, there's a lot to do around Amherst, and we have a bunch of really, true blue fans that they really wanted us to win. But it's really interesting. I think that Amherst is one of those places that if we hadn't won tonight, they all would have congratulated me, and now they would have gone down and watched the baseball team.
Well, a nice, easy trip for them to be able to do that. You talked about that point early in the season. You guys lose 2 games. Things are a little bit coming undone. And really, it was a gut check. What happened? And how significant, now looking back on it, was it?
That was the most significant thing that ever could have happened to us, because we were sort of drifting. We were good, we weren't good, And the Brandeis team that we beat on the Saturday after losing that second game, I still think was an NCAA team and very, very good and a great chance to win it. And so for us to go out and play like we played on that Saturday after what we had done before that was amazing. And we haven't looked back, and we've had some great situations happen to us. We went to Hamilton and we should have lost that game. Somehow we pulled it out. I still don't know how. We went up to Middlebury and, of course, the triple overtime, and we pulled that one out. So good things were happening to us, and they all started to grow, but they grew from December 6th.
Brandeis was key. You mentioned Hamilton. Of course, Middlebury seemed like a key game. There were a lot of different moments in the season that seemed to be good triggers, or at least keep the ball rolling, as it were. But if you were to have to pick one that you kind of realized, okay, this team has got a chance now, what might have it been?
Well, different things for different reasons. I mean, sure. I still put Brandeis sort of toward the top, but I have to tell you, the way we played against Randolph-Macon, I thought we could have played against anybody. I mean, we played, they were as good a team as I've seen. Athletic, really long, big, strong, could score it, could push it up the floor, rebound, and we just came out and punched them in the face. And, you know, that was, when I saw us play like that, I thought, you know, I know it's late, I know it's NCAA time, but I think we can actually get through Salem and get to Atlanta. And then once we got to Atlanta, I mean, you know, who knows, right?
The experience here in Atlanta, I know everybody has raved about it. For you guys who have gone through the whole realm of winning a championship in Salem and certainly getting plenty of attention there and getting the VIP treatment, what was it like to be here in Atlanta, especially for the 75th anniversary of basketball?
Yeah, you know, they did everything like the big boys do it. You know, they got pictures of the kids up on the Jumbotron there and stuff. You know, so it was just, I mean, I love Salem, and I think the Salem people do a job that's like out of this world. It's the Division III championship spot, but you know, to move this here, whether it's one time or whether it happens again, I mean, the treatment was just first class and unbelievable. It really was. It was awe-inspiring.
It couldn't go without at least a little bit of a blip. Lights go dim in the middle of the first half. Super Bowl references, Superdome references, CBS, of course, being the broadcaster yet again. What was your initial reaction to the whole thing, and what were you told when you guys had to huddle up about it?
Well, the initial reaction was they should have stopped the game, and then Toomey hit the three, and so I thought, what the heck, let's keep playing, that's all right. And then, but when we huddled up, I'm the person that made the point. They said, look, these lights aren't coming back on, we're going to play like this, but they might come back on. And I said, well, look, do me a favor, if they come back on and it's noticeably brighter, let's stop it, let's fast break, let's stop the play, and let kids' eyes refocus and get back where we should be, and we all agreed, which was great.
They didn't do it though, and the lights did come back up.
The lights did come back on?
Yeah, about midway through the second half.
Yeah, well,
you didn't notice at that point, right?
No.
What was the key to this game? You guys seemed to keep Mary Hardin-Baylor at arm's length for quite a bit of it. What was the key or what was the moment you finally realized, okay, we've held them off, they're not going to make a run like they did against St. Thomas, St. Mary's, and Whitworth?
Yeah, I mean, I thought once we got into the position that we could shoot some free throws, that we're a pretty good free throw shooting team, and I thought that they unraveled just a little bit, and they started to take, you know, real one-on-one shots, not getting to the basket, but some outside shots, because they really hadn't done a lot outside. They had a couple in the first half, but most of this stuff was offensive rebounds and getting to the rim, and once we had them panic a little bit, I thought, shoot the ball from the outside. You know, it didn't go in, and I thought, okay, we're in, we're going to be okay.
Tell me about your senior class. You know, these guys certainly, again, were cogs in this wheel from the very beginning. Just give me a sense.
No, it's irreplaceable. I mean, really, naturally we're going to try, but they're all so unique in what they do. There's not a bigger kid around than Pete, and so you saw tonight they started out sort of fronting and backing him, and so that takes two people to do that, and so the respect there was unbelievable. And Allen, you know, now he's the tournament MVP, and Allen came along just so much over the last 12 to 15 games, and he was awesome tonight and awesome in the tournament. And then, you know, Willie's Willie. Willie just does everything. If you look at Willie's stats, he's hit almost every major milestone in every category, from steals to assists to rebounds, you know, to points. I mean, they're all top shelf marks, and so yeah, they're a bit irreplaceable.
Talk about Aaron Toomey again, first team All-American for D3Hoops.com. Seemed at one point this junior year to turn a page, to turn a corner, really matured as a player. We saw it in this tournament run as well. What was that moment, do you think?
I don't know. I just think it's a continual growth. I think, he realized what he had around him. And I think he felt like he had to do too much before. And as this group has grown, and when you have, 4 other guys or 5 other guys, Connor Green did a great job tonight coming off the bench. Ben Pollock did a great job coming off the bench. Dave Kaleem is unbelievable. And so when you have 8 guys and different combinations, but you can turn to them, I think that's the growth process that happened with him. And, he's amazing, though. He still makes that one big one. And he made that big 3 that was deep. And it was down to, 3 or 4 on the shot clock, right?
Yeah.
And so, God bless him.
Finally, the team now gets to revel a little bit more VIP treatment being the national champs, but you're going to take some time tomorrow for yourself and your family. Do you mind telling everybody what your plans are?
No, it's just, it's my dad, and my dad, way back when in November, we were talking about the Masters being down here in Augusta, and we were so close. I said, why don't you come down? And he goes, something? He said, that's on my bucket list. He's never used the word bucket list. He's 84 years old. And so the minute he said that, the light went off. I got to do this, not really knowing that we were going to be here. Right. And next thing you know, we're here, and all of a sudden the schedule gets very complicated.
Yes.
But guess what? We're going to the Masters tomorrow with a national championship in hand, and so could life be better?
Make sure you wear the national championship hat. That'd be a nice little touch at the Masters.
I may just do that. Do you have a D3 Hoops thing? I'll advertise.
There we go. We'll try and find that. The other thing, too, is you got to get back back for stuff you got to do on Monday night.
Yeah, and I did have to promise the NCAA that if we won, I would make it back for the stuff we're doing Monday night. But trust me, we're going to be down. We're going most of the way tonight. We're going to be on the course at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And by noon, 1 o'clock, we will have had it.
Just don't speed on the way back, okay,
right,
Coach?
Yeah.
As always, I give the coach the final word. Any final things you want to say to those, especially from Amherst who may be tuning in?
Yeah, no, I thank you so much, fans, for what you've done, and the group that followed us down here. I mean, people from all over the country. Some of the 07 team came back with their rings on. Just a phenomenal impact on us in the game with the amount of people that we hear for Amherst. And my final word usually is to thank you guys for all you do to make D3 Hoops national. And it really is. I mean, you miss Mary Hardin-Baylor along the road somewhere with no ranking, but other than, you guys doing, it's unbelievable for guys to have 6 of the final 8 in their top 11. That's not happening with the prognosticators in D1. So you guys do a great job making us national. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And playing in front of 6,200 fans must have felt good, too.
It's great.
Yeah. Dave Hixon, national champion for the Amherst Lord Jeffs once again.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, again joined by Gordon Mann and Pat Coleman. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter if you have any questions. We'll try and answer them throughout the offseason as well, at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Of course, don't forget hashtag D3H. That's your home for Division III basketball on Twitter. And of course, Facebook.com/Hoopsville. You can also email us at Hoopsville@D3Hoops.com. Let's go back to this final game, final thoughts on the game, Pat. We've heard from both teams. Despite the loss, Mary Hardin-Baylor held their head high. Amherst obviously ecstatic, and everybody talked about just how good the game really was. I think coming in, we were fearful that we wanted good game. We were worried about getting a bad game, and while the score may not be indicative, at least both teams made it competitive and exciting.
Yeah, I think so. The fact that we mentioned Amherst jumps out to the big lead. Immediately, Mary Hardin-Baylor chips back into it. And even though the game was, between 7 and 11 points through most of the, first 30 minutes of the game, Amherst never pulled away. It remained a competitive game. It remained an exciting game. I think it showed well for Division III. But, Yeah, it wasn't until the last few minutes of the game where things started to get a little bit out of hand, and Mary Hardin-Baylor ends up losing by 17. But I think Mary Hardin-Baylor cemented in my mind they were worthy of that number 2 spot in the poll. They did enough the previous 4 weeks to certainly earn that, and they didn't get blown out. The 87-70 looks a little bit misleading. It's really like a 9 or 11 point game for the way it was handled most of the afternoon.
We talked about it earlier in the show. Kind of like Cabrini. Again, at a arm's length, the end of the game really wasn't indicative to how it was overall. Gordon, your impressions of seeing this game against a team you certainly knew well in Amherst, I should say, and a team you were kind of getting to know a little bit after learning it through our eyes, as it were, Mary Hardin-Baylor.
Well, I come away from it impressed by both teams. I thought Mary Hardin-Baylor represented themselves in their conference well. Texas, as Pat outlined in a piece that's on d3hoops.com, has not been able to put a lot of teams through. This was their first team into Salem. This was their first team really through each other. Right. Trinity and Mary, which is not in the same conference, but ends up knocking off a lot of these teams. Mary Hardin-Baylor, McMurray's not in Division III anymore. These teams have been in Division III, and this was a really nice run for Mary Hardin-Baylor because it established them. Previously the American Southwest Conference has sort of been the conference that is ranked in the top 15 and loses somewhere in Texas in the first weekend. And so I was talking to one of the Division III coaches coming into the building, and he said, "Well, how come Mary Hardin-Baylor was unranked for as long?" And I said, "Well, you got to remember this is a school and this is a conference that doesn't usually do real well this time of year, and they've turned that around. And I'm not sure you're ready to say that this is." Mary Hardin-Baylor had a lot of seniors. It was clear from talking to DeWeese, both in the press conference and in your interview here in the show. This was a senior-heavy team, and you could see this is the type of graduating class that's going to take a little bit. But I came away impressed with Mary Hardin-Baylor in general. And for Amherst, the NESCAC is an excellent conference. It's a very deep, it's a very strong conference at the top. I'm not sure it's a very deep conference, but it's a very strong conference at the top. Excellent schools, recruits well, and not a surprise that in a sport where you really only need 5 or 6 kids to have a dominant program, that the NESCAC has been able to do that. I think it's a little harder in the larger sports. We'll never know with football, but Amherst, Williams, these are schools where the kids that are in those rotations are already looking at Ivy Leagues and Patriot Leagues. And if I can take 3 or 4 guys, whether it's at Williams or Middlebury or Amherst or whatever, who are kind of fringe level D1 players, and put them together with a coach like Hixon, you're going to win a lot of games.
Pat, Gordon alluded to it, obviously the first time in the polls history that an unranked team made it to the championship game. And I mean, you and I have talked about it for a long time. They beat Concordia in the championship of their conference. They're probably getting votes, if not in the top 25. There's so many question marks that surrounded them. But on the flip side, Amherst lived up to its number 2, and it was a number 2 they seemed to just kind of float to. And I don't mean that disparagingly to Lord Jeffs. We just had so much parity this year and so many teams losing that teams tended to just float in and around the top 10.
Yeah, but and also, not only did Amherst float, but they beat Williams and they beat Middlebury. And they beat them decisively, and they beat them every time. They end the season on a 24-game winning streak. They did what they had to do with their schedule in order to merit that number 2 spot. Absolutely. Not an issue. So for Mary Hardin-Baylor, not only unranked, they did not receive a single vote in the final poll. I think one of the things that I go back to, Gordon alluded to the story that's on the site. I'm looking back, and compiled a chart of where the Texas team finished the last 10 years, where in the tournament they got knocked out. For a lot of those years, it's first weekend. And in a lot of the cases, it's not even the American Southwest Conference team that's the last one standing. It's Trinity, Trinity of Texas. UT Dallas, got to the point where they got to the Elite Eight. They lost to Guilford on a neutral floor. Mary Hardin-Baylor went to the round of 16 a couple years ago. UT Dallas has been to the second weekend more than once. This is a conference that's getting there. What they had to do in the past, most often, is they have to get through the best the West region has to offer, and whether that's going to Stevens Point and winning, or beating Stevens Point on the road, going to Whitworth and winning, those are things that are difficult to do. They're difficult to do in Division III. But Mary Hardin-Baylor did it. They went to Whitworth and won in a fantastic atmosphere for small college basketball. Then they beat the number 1 team in the country, and they rallied from 14 down to do it. So Mary Hardin-Baylor got over that hump. They did what they needed to do. Does that necessarily elevate and put extra shine on the whole conference? Yeah, it does for now, and it does for the next 7 months. And we'll see what happens in November and December.
And quickly, this is again Mary Hardin-Baylor. If they beat Concordia, Texas,
yeah, I guess
they're playing Trinity, they don't get that first round bye. It could certainly change things. So things, we always say it in the bracket. Sometimes things have to go in your favor, and maybe that went in their favor because a lot of people have said they were a different team coming out of the bye than they were going in.
Well, and I talked to Ken DeWeese after the game in a separate conversation. He was talking about what happened last year. If you remember last year, you may probably have not remembered. Mary Hardin-Baylor goes 20-1 in the conference. They lose whatever it was. They lose one conference game, and then they get bounced in the first round. They had a couple of guys hurt. A couple of guys didn't play in that first round NCAA tournament game against Trinity, and they're done. And you never think of them again. And DeWeese expressed what a lot of coaches have expressed. You have to have that little bit of luck. It's not just you have to have a great team to make a tournament run. How many times have we heard a coach come to Salem or come to the Final Four or the championship game and say, well, shoot, that's not even our best team. I had a much better team 2 years ago or whatever. Because the ball has to bounce right. I mean, I hate to keep going back to Catholic 2001, but that's a team.
Absolutely.
That's a team that was down double-digit points in the second half in like 4 consecutive games in the NCAA tournament, and they had to have a bunch of things go right down the stretch for them to win that championship, and they are not alone. There's a lot of teams that have to do that. It's just. That's the thing I love. It's the thing I love about basketball. The thing I love about this tournament, not only at this level but at other levels too, is there's a little bit of luck, there's a little bit of happenstance, there's a lot of skill and a lot of great coaching, but sometimes the ball has to bounce your way.
Quickly, Gordon, from Amherst's point of view, that you don't want to give Dave Hixon 2 weeks to prepare. Plattsburgh State found out what that was like, and Mary Hardin-Baylor, while it certainly wasn't the same game, also found out he certainly had some schemes up his sleeve, and it just proves we may not get it often with 2 weeks off. Just don't give Hixon 2 weeks.
Yeah, and one of the things you notice, it was particularly evident in their defense. Every move a Mary Hardin-Baylor player started to make, the Amherst kid was ready for it and was ready to shut it off with one step. And that's a preparation thing. That's something you don't get if this is in Salem and Mary Hardin-Baylor beats St. Thomas on Friday night and plays them on Saturday. So that's a preparation thing, and it'll sound a bit like a stereotype, but the kids at Amherst are smart. They're going to be good at studying. Studying is not something they're afraid to do, and they did it well in the film room.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about Atlanta again. For the student athletes here, this has been terrific. Yep. From being flown in, getting onto buses, and police escorts to everything. The salute dinner where they were treated just like the D1s. The D2 guys especially also treated just like the D1s, getting the exact same treatment, being honored at the Final Four games on Saturday night as the teams that will compete for the championships, right through the championship games, the cool introductions, confetti. I mean, they made sure these guys felt like they were just as important as what everybody really came here for, and that was the D1 games, obviously, because everybody comes to the Final Four for that. Well, except for us, obviously. But it certainly made them feel awfully special, and that's all anybody's been talking about from those teams.
Yeah, and it would have been very easy for the NCAA to cheap out just a little bit. I mean, not even, there's a difference between 100% equality, or so to speak, and 90% or even 80%, and the D3 kids still would have thought, wow, this is fantastic. We got a police escort from the airport.
Granted, in this traffic, police escorts were mandatory for every team.
But exactly, but that didn't have to continue. They could have been, you get on a bus and you go to the game. I don't think anybody would have thought any differently if that didn't happen. Or, the only thing I wanted to see was I really wanted to see the Michigan and the Louisville players get brought out during the first half of the D3 game to get recognized. But we talk about Salem doing things first class. There's another level. It's first class with a ton of money behind it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We talk about what makes Salem so good at what they do. Well, they make it seem like it's a big stage.
Yeah.
Well, this was a big stage. This is one of the largest cities in the country. You've got hundreds of thousands of basketball fans here. You've got an NBA arena. You've got a who's who of Division I players and coaches just milling around the city. I mean, you can we walked into the hotel tonight with John Thompson III, 20,
no big deal.
Yeah, 15 feet from me, and I didn't even notice him. And for the D3 kids who are here who get to do that, who are also fans. I mean, these kids are sports fans. You saw Toomey come out with the Syracuse shirt because his dad went to Syracuse. Right. There's a lot of, I think, of hidden fanboy moments here for these guys that you just can't get it in a smaller city. There's a difference between making it feel like the big time and being the big time.
Of course, Mary Hardin-Baylor, technically being the losing team, is supposed to leave town on Monday.
They are the losing team.
Well, they are the losing team. But I mean, technically, because of that, they should be leaving town on Monday. They're staying through Tuesday, though apparently having to switch hotels, but that's neither here nor there. But that's because they want to experience this for what it is. Who knows if this is a unique opportunity or not? That's something we can talk about later in the show. But Pat, they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. They wanted to take advantage of this surroundings, and for these two teams, it can't get any better than this first experience. And I'm glad it happened because we were trepidatious about a lot of it.
Yeah, we really thought that there was a possibility that not only could this event on Sunday play second fiddle to the D1 championship, but could play third fiddle, D3 to D2. And the only place that really happened was on television and on the internet. The people who were at home who couldn't watch it on the internet, and the hundreds of millions of people who have CBS, the network, but can't easily find or don't have the right package to get CBS Sports Network. Everything else, it was really first class. And, it's great, for these kids. That was the one thing I knew coming into the weekend. No matter what happened at the game, no matter how the game turned out, no matter how many people turned out, I knew that these kids, especially the seniors, were going to come away with a fantastic experience that they could remember for the rest of their lives, and for seniors to end their college basketball career on. So it was great that happened, and it was, the cake underneath the icing, frankly, that everything else went well too.
And back to the arena, again, 6,200 people show up for this game for the Division III side. And it wasn't only Division III fans. There were a number of coaches, obviously, from Division III, and outside of that, there were a number of fans who just appreciated basketball, whether they were here for the tournament or they lived here. Certainly a lot of fans came out. And Gordon, we certainly enjoyed it, despite the slight power issue about midway through the first half.
Yeah, well, Toomey hit a three-pointer on what
were you saying it was Toomey's fault?
It was a messy fast break that Amherst had 3-on-1 and missed 3 chances, and in the middle of that mess, a light bank on Amherst's side of the court too went out, and Toomey hit the 3, and then there was a media timeout. But I thought, actually, to the credit of the arena officials, I thought they handled it really well. They didn't stop the game for 10 minutes, and I'm not sure CBS would have let them anyway. But they got together. Hixon talked about it in the post game, and was obviously in pretty high spirits already as it was, but he said they decided that unless the lights came back on and it was noticeably different, they were just going to play through it. Right. And actually the lights were another really key part of the game, of the atmosphere, in that they turned the lights down in the upper bowl. You didn't even know it was there. The arena, which is an NBA arena, shrunk to the size of the Batten Center in Virginia Wesleyan just by turning lights off, and that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, by the way, some of the lighting solutions is they turned on some lights for the ice hockey abilities. Of course, that ice hockey team no longer here in Atlanta, but it was helpful. They were able to do that, and you'll hear from Mike DeWitt later. Basically, the lighting was similar to their shoot-around yesterday, so it wasn't that big a deal. About halfway through the second half, they all came back on. By the way, the TV truck also kind of took that hit, that power hit. Something about CBS and big games, they can't seem to keep the lights on.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, even the reduced lighting was 10 times better than any Division III gym on any regular basis anyway, other than Hope. That's about the only place where the lighting was better.
Yeah, absolutely. So another great experience. Of course, the fans also treated like they were special in this thing. I will take away from going to this arena that they have one heck of a shirt cannon. A Gatling gun, of shirts flying around the arena. When we come back, we'll talk to Coach Mike DeWitt about his thoughts as his wraps up his first and final year as men's committee chair, and what the future may hold. There are some changes, as you may know and may not know, coming along for men's basketball and really for all of NCAA. Speaking of that, we'll get the state of D3 from Vice President of Division III, Dan Dutcher, as well. And of course, we'll come back coming up as well with our thoughts on, can this really be the future for Division III basketball, and for that matter, Division II as well. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com, the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Back after this.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Welcome back to Hoopsville in Atlanta. We are wrapping up the 2012-2013 season just as Amherst has wrapped up a national championship. Their other one coming in 2007. After the game, I got a chance to talk to men's basketball committee chair and Ohio Wesleyan head coach Mike DeWitt. Hear his thoughts on what went well this year and what they hope they can continue to improve upon in the years ahead. Now joined by Coach Mike DeWitt, outgoing men's committee chair for the Division III men's basketball committee. First and foremost, I'm sure that is a little bit of a relief that you finally have everything done and it's wrapped up. We have a national championship. Your job is done.
Almost. We have a meeting in June to wrap things up.
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, we're done with the tournament. Our whole committee can relax a little bit, and and look forward. The guys that are returning can look forward to the future and see what improvements we need to make.
Both an exciting and yet challenging tournament. Obviously, we talked already about the bracket of death and some of the challenges you guys had in putting this all together. But overall, your thoughts on how the tournament came together all the way to Atlanta?
Well, given the complete change in the way the tournament was run this year, I thought our committee did a commendable job of just making some common sense decisions, working within the guidelines we were given to make it a fair and competitive tournament for all the teams and the student athletes. And we're standing here today, an hour after we've crowned a national champion. I think everyone would say it was a pretty successful tournament.
Almost unfortunate you guys were in the tournament because you couldn't take part in a lot of the dealings. But once you got back involved, and I know you oversaw things, it seemed like the best fit.
Yeah, I think I think it was good. For me to experience it both as a coach and as an administrator, to see what improvements we could make after my team got beat, and again helping the tournament run smoothly.
Of course, we had the uniqueness of going to Salem with an Elite Eight. There's a lot of talk now of maybe making that a permanent thing. Of course, we came to Atlanta. There's been a warm reception on making, the D3 guys were really well treated, just like D1 players. So there's a lot of talk of trying to do this again. What's the perfect remedy? Again, we're only talking an hour after the championship game, or is there maybe a hybrid?
Who knows? I think, from what I hear from the people I know in the NCAA, the weekend has gone very, very well for them, and they like the result. From the Division III coaches, I know a lot of those guys. They're really pleased with what they saw today and all weekend. The question's going to be, in the future, can cities that hold the Final Four take the Division II and III finals as well? We don't know that. They're going to have to give both divisions a little bit more lead time so they can adjust their regular season schedules accordingly, so we don't have a situation this year where we had a 3-week tournament in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That was not an optimal situation, as everybody knows, but we did make the best of it. A lot of factor. Money's obviously always a factor with the NCAA with regard to Division III. Are they going to be willing to spend the money they did this year every single year to provide the type of experience and the type of festivities surrounding the 75th anniversary of the Final Four? Are they going to want to do that every year? I can't answer that question, but I do know our student athletes from Amherst and Mary Hardin-Baylor were treated extremely well. One of the fears we had coming into this was that Division III would get, kind of pushed toward the side. That did not happen. In fact, I think we got promoted very, very well, and our brand of basketball showed very well on the CBS Sports Network this afternoon. So, there's a lot of good things for it, but some adjustments need to be made. But I think as we go forward, one of the things we're going to look at, and this decision to hold these championships in conjunction with the Final Four is not our men's basketball committee's decision. Right. It's the NCAA's decision. So we need to, again, they need to communicate with us to see what they want to do. Going forward with your question about, having an Elite Eight type format in Salem, where we currently hold the championship, that we're going to discuss that in June. Having 8 teams in Salem as opposed to 4 it's a cool thing. I mean, I can phrase that better if you want, but it was really neat. It was really neat having 8 teams there, and if we can double the amount of teams that get the experience that Salem provides, which is exceptional, I think more student athletes can get the benefit of what that entails. So that is something we'll discuss in June, because I think there's a lot of support for that within our ranks.
6,200 fans showed up to the Phillips Arena. The arena seemed pretty cozy for this game. Certainly not the Georgia Dome, which was rather expensive. Right. Did it meet your expectations?
It really did, and probably exceeded them. The Phillips Arena people, in conjunction with the NCAA, did a great job of they did close the upper deck and with a black curtain, but you didn't even notice that. Yeah. And that was really good. So people were forced to sit in the lower bowl. They would have anyway, probably. And it showed well on TV. It looked like there were a lot of people there. And 6,200 for a championship game, I'm assuming, is probably a record. And so I think I think those people need to be commended, for making this work and making it a great experience.
The lights did blink out. Some of them did. Right there in the first half, you had a front row seat to the goings on. Your reactions to what was a mini Super Bowl experience for everybody in Division III.
Yeah, as the chair of the committee, I am somewhat responsible for the game operations. And when the lights blinked, I said to myself, this couldn't have gone easy for me. There had to be some type of glitch in it. But again, it was just one bank of lights. They were able to turn on some other lights that they traditionally use here for hockey games to brighten it up a little bit as the game continued. Fortunately, it was bright enough, and both coaches agreed that we were just going to continue play. It's funny. It was actually, the lighting was the exact same lighting they had the day before in practice. So It wasn't that much of a big deal for the players, and it certainly didn't affect the game at all. But you're always wondering when that happens, when the next bank of lights is going to go out, and then you've got major issues, especially with CBS going on the air at 4 o'clock with a Division II game, and then having to delay that would have been a nightmare.
As outgoing chair, I'm sure you have thoughts on the future. We have a lot of changes coming with the regional realignment in a year's time. We have regional games being augmented a little bit in the sense that all games count as long as you play 70% in region. That's going to change the criteria. That's going to change the selection process. It almost may get rid of secondary criteria in some senses of the term. What are your hopes of improvement or even dealing with those things as we move forward?
Well, you mentioned several things going on with the criteria. Number one being the fact that 70% of your games are played in region now instead of 50, but every game counts, and that's something as coaches I think we've wanted for a long, long time. So now Laverne in California can play Amherst in Massachusetts, and can count as a game, which it should count. So that's a good thing. I think it does affect how the regional rankings and the number of criteria we'll have to have. It's going to, we'll have to wait and see how the championships committee is going to, what columns we're going to have to look at, but obviously we're not going to have primary, strength of schedule and secondary strength of schedule. We'll have one strength of schedule number to look at, which I think will simplify things. We also have coming it's now going to be not a once ranked, always ranked situation with regard to the number of games and number of wins you have against regionally ranked teams. They're just going to look at the teams that are currently ranked to determine that record. And that's also coming in for next year too. So I'm interested to see how that works. And again, that's something our committee will kind of hammer out all the details in June to see, what exactly that's going to, what consequences will happen when we compute that criteria. And like you said, the third thing is the regional realignment piece coming in 2014, 2015. A lot of that was just kind of semantics and just, kind of getting men's and women's teams in the same region. But there are some changes. The Wisconsin Conference is going to go to the Midwest now. That's going to create some a different competitive situation. And the Heartland Conference, I believe, is moving to the Great Lakes. So
your grounds.
Yeah. So again, in an attempt to, kind of even out the regions numbers-wise, and again, as sometimes things work in the NCAA, they asked our committee and the women's committee for a proposal. We put it together, and they took bits and pieces of it. They didn't take all of it, which is fine. But it's going to be, again, interesting 2014-15, to see some of those changes come along in men's and women's basketball.
Another thing that's interesting was, you guys in the men's basketball side use the multiplier of 1.25 for away and 0.07 for homes, 1.0 for neutrals, to multiply out the winning percentages. And when the NCAA stats came out and said, actually, we're going to multiply that by the individual numbers of win and losses, I'll freely admit, initially I went, oh, great, that's a more individual number, that's better. But it turns out our mathematician friends figured out it washed out the multiplier completely. Yeah. How do you tackle that as a committee at this point?
Well, we in June we meet with the NCAA statistics people and figure out how we're going to get it right. Quite honestly, I think our committee was aware of that situation and did the best we could to really, really pour through everybody's schedule to make sure, we were having valid strength of schedule numbers, consistently. But that's something, again, that wasn't taken into consideration because our committee does use the multiplier. So, we'll get, again, it's an ongoing process. We'll get that hopefully corrected as much as we can after our June meeting.
As a coach moving forward, obviously not much as an administrator. You've always been blunt, though, as an administrator with me on your thoughts. What do you hope is the right steps moving forward? What do you want to see changed, maybe?
I'd like to see an Elite Eight format go forward. I think it's great for the student athletes. I think it could be a great celebration of Division III basketball as we currently have the tournament run. I'd like to see the situation we're experiencing this year considered. I'd like to see the NCAA put some money into Division III basketball to make this as good of an experience for Division I, II, and III players, and I think all three of those divisions, have a great experience at the Final Four. I'd like our group to be a part of that. I think with the ranking process and those kind of things, it's tough because you're dealing with numbers, but on an objective basis, but sometimes subjectively, things are different when you're looking at those numbers, and I'd like us to see maybe a little more freedom given the committees to rank teams the way they see fit, and that's probably against a lot of what my colleagues think. But when we run into situations this year where we know a team like Cabrini or Calvin is very, very good, but their numbers don't show it, and we can't rank them any higher than we can rank them because of those numbers, it's frustrating. Because I had a sense Calvin was a very, very good team, and I know their fans were disappointed they got ranked so low in the Great Lakes region, but we couldn't move them any higher because they hadn't beaten anybody outside of their conference in the region above a 500 record, and I don't think they played anybody close to having a 500 record. So, if we could have some subjective, ideas and some common sense ideas, and maybe in a situation like that make an exception to the numbers, I'd be okay with that because I would trust I've seen what our regional committees and our national committees do, and every decision that's made is made with a lot of thought and a lot of intent to get it right, and I would trust people on those committees to get it right and do the best they can.
Would you want to come back one more year as committee chair?
No, probably not. Probably not. I feel like it's something that everyone should experience, good and bad. And besides the 1 year as a committee chair, it's 4 years on the national committee and 3 years on Iraq previous to that. So, I feel like it's someone else's turn. I feel like, I'd like to get back to, being a normal coach and,
Is there such thing?
There probably is not, but, it is a time commitment. I've spent 2 weekends ago in Salem, spent 5 days away from my family, spent 6 days away from them here. Like everybody, I've got a family that I'd like to spend time with. So that's something I'm looking forward to at this point.
Men's committee's come a long way in the last few years under the direction of the Charlie Brocks and the Dave Martins, and then yourself as well, of course, and anybody else I may have neglected to mention. How do you keep the momentum? How do you keep the mission moving forward without any maybe blimps or fallbacks by accident?
I think you still stay involved, and Charlie Brock's a great example of that. Pat Cunningham is another former committee member who's really stayed involved and kind of mentored some of our younger committee members this year, and you hope some lessons are learned as you go forward. And we had 5 new committee members this year, and every single one of them brought some great ideas and brought a lot of common sense and a lot of good thought to the position, and I think going forward, hopefully we can maintain that momentum that you talked about, and keep making the improvements necessary to make this as fair and as competitive but as fair as possible with the rankings process and the tournament selections.
Men's committee's also been at the forefront of trying to make the final regional rankings public. Is there any chance that's going to happen? I assume you guys will keep up the fight.
I assume so too, and I think again, as in June, I still think we'll probably make that suggestion to the championships committee. What we run into is there's a lot of other sport committees that don't want those those last rankings released. I hate to say we're fighting a losing battle, but I also think if it's right. I can't fathom why we release all the other rankings and not the last one. It just doesn't make sense.
And if you were to make the argument for why they should be public, besides obviously the other ones are public as well, to counter whoever says they shouldn't, what would the argument be, or what has the argument been?
Well, I think it's consistency is why do you do it the first 3 times, and why do you release them the first 3 weeks and then not the last time? I think when you don't release it, the immediate assumption is, well, what are they hiding? And our committee doesn't want to hide anything. We're going to make decisions to the best of our ability. If we screw it up, we screw it up, but we're going to admit we screwed it up. But I think, people assume you're hiding something, and we're not hiding anything. And that's the argument, is why are we hiding behind not releasing the rankings?
And then the last one, you mentioned, I neglected to mention or get to this, but you mentioned that it's only going to be regionally ranked opponent results against who's ranked at that time, not the once ranked, always ranked, or any other version of that. Does that maybe open up the chance just a little bit to get an extra one regional ranking in there? Because it seems, at least from our point of view and certainly from others, that there just isn't enough regional rankings to give everybody a sense of where they stand. And I know they restricted the number because of the once ranked, always ranked. Is there a way to open it up one more? 2 might be pushing it because the data is still a little bit raw, but is there a way we can at least see the playing field a little bit sooner?
Honestly, I hadn't thought of that, and that's not a bad thought. And you're exactly right. I think one of the reasons we've gone to fewer and fewer rankings over the years is because of the once ranked, always ranked situation. I think now that we don't have that, I'm putting it on the agenda in June, that I think we need to look at maybe having 1 more week of rankings. I don't think that's a bad thing. We already do 2 practice rankings and 3 real rankings now, so it wouldn't take any more time on the committee's part. We'd just basically be releasing the 2nd practice ranking.
And would it be unfair to ask you who you think the committee chair is next year?
Yeah, because I have no idea with all the turnover and everything, and I'm not sure, quite honestly. Some of the new people are filling in for some people who left the committee, and their terms are not going to be 4 years. They're going to be 2 or 3 years. So honestly, I haven't looked at that to see. I could figure it out, but it would take too long. But I think our committee has a decision in how we're going to approach that as the new chair is elected in June. And the chair position, again, it's kind of the public face of the committee, but the entire committee just is the group that's doing the work, and being the chair is you get to do stuff like being interviewed by Dave McHugh. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Might be a blessing in disguise.
Those are just things that it's just being the public face of it. It's not really having any more duties or any more decision-making power at all. It's just doing what I'm doing right now.
Put a name on the form. Quickly, as basketball coach, Ohio Wesleyan moving forward, I know we are looking forward to having you at the Hoopsville Classic at Stevenson University almost to start next season, the 3rd weekend of November. How does the team look for next year after a nice NCAA run here, being ranked in the top 25 at least up to this point?
It's going to be nice to being asked about my team again instead of like regional rankings and stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to that.
I can imagine.
We had a great year, our 2nd most wins in school history. We also had a first-team All-American All-American point guard who did a lot for us, who graduates, along with 7 other senior classmates. So we lose a big chunk of our team. But having said that, we also returned 4 of our top 7 scorers. So we've got a good core group coming back. We'll need to develop some depth as the year goes on next year. We may not be too good early at the Hoopsville Classic. I hope we don't embarrass ourselves.
You're setting the bar down low on me. Very
really
nice.
Low. Really, I'm giving you my best Lou Holtz impersonation right now. But I do think as the year goes on, I think we'll get better and better as some of our younger players, get some experience.
Well, you're only one of 5 teams who made the NCAA tournament who are going to be at the Hoopsville Classic, so no pressure for you at all. Finally, as you always know, I give the final word to the guest. Any final thoughts you want to share with those tuning in?
It's been a pleasure, working with you guys over the last, 4 years and beyond. And I think, I think, again, what you guys do for us in Division III basketball, with all that's gone on here this weekend in Atlanta, I don't think we can overlook what you and Pat do for us. And with that, hopefully that's never overlooked, because you guys are our bread and butter in terms of media coverage and getting the word out there about what our student athletes are doing. And I'd just like to thank you guys for that.
Well, thank you. And I will say for the last time, Men's Basketball Committee Chair Mike DeWitt, soon to be only head coach at Ohio Wesleyan. Once again, thanks to Coach Mike DeWitt for joining us. He was a wonderful ambassador to Division III basketball this year. We appreciated his frank and honest answers throughout the year, and certainly didn't hold anything back as well here. We certainly will look forward to the changes that come on this committee as the years progress. Of course, their meeting is again coming up in June. We'll also get a sense of who may be the next committee chair at that time. When we come back, we'll talk to Pat Coleman and Gordon Mann about what could possibly be needed to bring a game again to the Final Four, or other ideas that are now on the table after a very eye-opening Division III men's basketball tournament. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We'll be back right after this.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things, not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
And welcome back to Hoopsville once again. We're actually, by the way, at the hotel where many of the coaches are staying, especially associated with the National Association of Basketball Coaches, thus the slight din you hear of crowd who are a level below us. It has been this throughout the weekend, one of the more interesting parts of the experience, at least from our point of view. Let's go back to what Coach Mike DeWitt spoke of earlier about what we can do. The fact that this tournament, Pat, has created a buzz. Yeah. The first buzz we heard was the idea of 8 teams being in Salem. And the fact that at that time, many people were still not happy about coming to Atlanta in the sense of what it did to the tournament. So we'll get to that in a second. But so they talked, hey, 8 teams, 1 champion, let's do it that could be fun. Now that after that experience, we're hearing that other part. This was really good. Yeah. And it's turned someone like me into a bit of a believer that this could be done if done right. But let's just start with the fact that we've had a very different mentality after this tournament. Now taking 8 teams to Salem is something seriously being considered. And now the idea of maybe coming to a Final Four location with a title game is also seriously being considered.
Well, and I think if you do the latter, you have to do the former. If you bring just 2 teams to a championship site, then you pretty much have to play the 8 and 4 rounds somewhere else. First of all, Dave, Mr. Cynic here becoming a believer. That's pretty impressive. Slight. I'll have to be honest with you. I was dubious about it coming into the afternoon as well, and it was just, like I said, just a fantastic atmosphere. You think it was good for the D3 game? I don't know if you watched the D2 game. It was better. The place was packed. The lower bowl was packed. they announced 7,700 or something like that. That if a D3 SID or a D2 SID had been counting the attendance, it would have been about 85 or 9,000, something like that. But it was just great. So, the thing is if we want to do this, we can't do it next year. I don't think we could.
Logistically set.
We couldn't solve the problems we'd have to solve. Obviously, it was about this time last year that they, really started talking about this happening for this year. But there are some things we definitely have to do. This was sold as a one-year thing. So, the presidents of Division III schools and such who vote on things at the NCAA convention never really had to consider this, never got to consider this. This would require a significant change in the NCAA schedule for Division III.
Well, let me just check with Gordon quickly. He says dubious. I was a cynic. Your thoughts on what you have a third word you could throw in here on what you thought on before we started this whole process?
I guess I was sort of curious and open-minded. I haven't had the same Salem experience you have. I've only been there twice, and my experience for a championship perspective is women's Division III basketball, which is an entirely different experience, whether it's D1 or D3. So I was sort of open-minded about it. A little defensive at first. I sort of think I looked at it the same way that. I think kind of the lacrosse or the hockey community or the soccer community looks at it, where they go, well, they don't understand us, they don't get us. They sort of do. It's college basketball, and it was, it was a great experience. I think the D2 game where there was 8,000 fans, and on CBS where we'd like to see the Division III game, obviously a fantastic finish, and just everybody's kind of hairs on the back of their neck were standing up as Drury, which is in Missouri if you didn't know, beat Metro State, which is in Denver, which you didn't know, which I didn't 8 hours ago. Colorado apparently, but it was a great finish, and let me see, if I'm a D2 guy, can I play 3 games in a row in Springfield, Massachusetts in front of 3,000 people, or 8,000 people in Atlanta at the Final Four? That's a pretty tough call,
exactly.
And if D2 moves over, how does D3 not? I mean, how do you say we want equal treatment and we're part of the NCAA, but by the way, leave us alone, we're going to go do our tournament somewhere else?
So let's talk about those challenges and those hurdles to come. FYI, from what I've gathered, Salem has one more year technically on its bid, though nobody's really re-upped on Salem that we've even heard of, so they're probably going to get the next bid for 2 years. Of course, on the women's side, they have a one-year bid at Stevens Point, and you will hear from Dan Dutcher that basically that was probably to get all basketball kind of on the same bid process, so they're not overlapping a little bit. Same calendar cycle, exactly. But there's challenges and hurdles to this. Obviously, the 6-week structure, Pat, not going to work. There isn't one coach who's going to tell you they enjoyed the 6-week structure. The fact that these two teams had 2 weeks between games to start and 2 weeks between games to finish, not very enjoyable. You and I chatted quickly. This could work if you want to try and figure it out, because you're going to have to shift schedules. We'll get to that in a second. This could work as a 4-week structure instead of a 3. Play, let's say, 2 weeks, 2 games of opening weekend at neutral sites or pods. Single game Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, say in Salem, and then come to the championship game. A little bit like the 2 is kind of doing in some ways as well.
Well, and then what would you have to do for us to kind of line up with Division I in a 4-week tournament is, remember, first of all, this year, Division I tournament is a week later than usual. We can debate about why that was and who's holding the purse strings on that decision. But what we'd have to do in order to line up normally is, I think we'd have to start 1 week later, I think, in the season, 1 week later in the calendar, around Thanksgiving, if not afterwards, so that we can continue to have a 19-week basketball season, because that's what the Division III standard is for winter sports, in order for that to line up. So, the good thing is that, maybe you don't start until after Thanksgiving, or maybe you start on Thanksgiving weekend or something like that. It would take a couple of years for us to line up that calendar. There have been tip-off tournaments already scheduled and that sort of thing. People may already have flights for their teams for next November to go play somewhere.
Well, and conference schedules 16th. Are at least a year out in advance.
Right, and so then you have to line up conference schedules, and here's where it gets tricky, because in every conference, basically, men and women conference schedules pretty much overlap. They don't always play the same sites. They don't always play the same teams, but the conference schedule pretty much happens at the same time. So if the men do it, the women have to change their schedule, and the women have to figure out what they want to do, whether they want to do this or not. Might be up to them, might be up to Indianapolis, who knows. And then, Division II has to do it. Oh, by the way, Division II women have to do it also. Right. I think, anybody who is here, Division II, Division III, Championships Committee, the NCAA officials who are here, maybe even Mark Emmert noticed, I don't know, but he was in the building, and all the NABC coaches who are here have to come away from this thinking this is a great idea and putting their weight behind it. So, those are some of the big logistical challenges that have to be changed. And then, one of the things that's been bothering me from kind of day one on this is coming to Atlanta is a heck of a lot more expensive for fans than it is to go to Salem. Obviously, a lot of people came here. So this was, they viewed this as a once-in-a-lifetime thing, the only chance they might have to do something like this. But, when you'd start talking about paying $250 or $300 for a hotel room for a night as compared to, 89, 100, 110 in Salem, something like that, it begins to be a bit of a problem. It's great for the student-athlete experience, not so great for the fan experience. Unfortunately, Division III has not really cared about that so much in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's by the way, real quick, for people who complain about Salem getting hard to get to, at least it's reasonably priced. It's easy to get to Atlanta. It's not reasonably priced.
Yeah, although I would say
it's reasonable to get here. It's not reasonable to stay here once you get here. Right.
Although I would say, if you're telling me that I can spend, and finances are personal, but if you're telling me I can spend $300 and go to Salem for a weekend and watch 3 basketball games, or I can spend $500 and go to Atlanta and watch a whole bunch of basketball games, including maybe the Final Four. There were lots of empty seats in the Georgia Dome last night. That makes that call pretty easy. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of people who are basketball fans who aren't all through the levels fans.
What if it's $1,000 instead of $500? Because I think that's more reasonable a number.
Yeah, and these areas are large. It depends how far away you want to stay. I mean, most of the people who are here are within 2 football fields of the arena. But I think that's something you can work through. It's easier to fly to Atlanta than it is to Salem. If you want to fly and you don't want to get in a car and drive, you can't do that with price. I thought one of the other tricks and one of the things that I think will be a significant hurdle to get over to make this lineup was something Hixon talked about in the post game. He said, these at the Division III level, these kids are students first, and it's not to say the kids at the Division I levels aren't, but he said this was a really long season. If they start practice in late October, basketball has become a 6.5-month sport. Yeah. School itself is only 9 months, and he relayed the anecdote of a kid who was a freshman in college who probably wasn't going to play a lot of time anyway, who just needed to go home because of family issues, and you really stretch that out. He also raised the fact, which is probably not an issue in definitely at the Division I level, maybe not at the D2 level, of kids playing multiple sports. Now, I don't know that we have a lot of that, but if basketball becomes a 6.5-month sport, you can't play anything else. And some of the sports like baseball are really time-consuming as it is because they also stretch things out with voluntary workouts. But I think Hixon's point there is an important one. Are you ready to tell these kids that the carrot at the end of the stick is getting this tremendous experience for 2 of 400-something schools and there's a significant percentage who know they're not going to be in the equation at the end of the year. But the trade-off is the basketball season is now 6.5 months long, so there is no spring break. Internships or studying abroad becomes much, much harder. And all these things that are part of the Division III academic experience suddenly become more complicated. Remember, this is a conference that had a significant part of the membership think about not doing any national championship and just being Division IV and just saying, you know what, we're going to do regionals, we're going to let the kids be students, and we're done. And that's not just schools in the NESCAC. That's a significant portion of the body that makes these decisions. And that's the other thing to remember. The body that makes these decisions here are the programs. It's not Mark Emmert, in an ivory tower saying this year the school shall do this. It's the membership. And does the membership want to do this? Amherst and Mary Hardin-Baylor, the teams that were here, they'll say yes. What would the other 430-something programs say? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting equation. By the way, something else to throw into the mix here is that, again, we mentioned the 4 weeks. You know, if the women don't want to do this, you still got 3 weeks to kind of do your traditional tournament. So that's kind of where I was thinking on the 4 week side of things. Yeah. And really, you know, Mike alluded to it too. Yeah, you know, the men's basketball committee might say, hey, we want to do this, but there's others powers that be, the presidents of the schools for especially. But honestly, the NCAA can also just say we want to do this. They can kind of say we want to do this, figure it out.
Right, and that, you know, in a sense, that's basically what happened this year. They came to us with an offer we couldn't refuse. Us as Division III, not the three of us, certainly, because they've come to us with those kind of offers too, but they're not good ones. But yeah, you know, they said we're going to do this great thing. It's for the 75th anniversary.
Please sign
it's
off.
a fantastic thing, and like, yeah, please do this. You have the power to say no. Here's where you sign to say yes.
Yeah.
You know, but so there's that, and then the other thing is that we have spent in Division III as a whole, as a community, the past couple of years really talking about what's great about Division III, why Division III is special. And we're going into, starting tomorrow, Division III week. And we just started Division III week by basking in the spotlight that Division I has deigned to shine upon us. You know, how is that really, you know, correspondent with that philosophy that Division III can stand on its own? You know, we're just about to say, all of us here are in agreement too, that we want to do this.
But there's hurdles.
Right. Well, and we want to do this, but there's hurdles. But, you know, we can stand on our own, but we don't want to.
Right. And by the way, Division III week, interesting talking to some of the NCAAs. They're not even sure this is the right timing for the Division III week. They're looking at maybe some other options for the future. So that whether they do this or not, we certainly think it's a great idea to do it. We also know it needs some careful planning. Yeah. It takes more than just D3 men's basketball to say this is something we want to do. D3 women, D2 and men and women have to sign off. And by the way, D1 really has to sign off on it too. Do they still want to share the spotlight, as it were, for this? When we come up, Dan Dutcher will talk, give his state of Division III, and when we come back, we will put a bow on this per se, at least from these guys' point of view, on the season that was in men's basketball. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. We'll be back right after this.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.D3Hoops.com.
And welcome to Atlanta. I'm Dave McHugh for D3Hoops.com. We're at Emory University. I'm joined by the Vice President for Division III, Dan Dutcher, on what has become a bit of an annual event, kind of a state of Division III with you. I appreciate you taking some time out of what is a very busy schedule this weekend to join us.
Thanks, Dave. My pleasure to be here.
We got a chat with you in Salem, and last year when you got a chance to check out the Final Four there. Of course, a little bit different this year. We're getting to play the championship game. Obviously, we should get a reaction from you. We talked about it a year ago. How has the year progressed to this point, and what do you think now of the games being here?
Well, it's great to be here. I'm just delighted with how this has all come together. To have the D2 and the D3 finals here in conjunction with the 75th anniversary of the men's Final Four. It's a great opportunity. It's been a lot of work by a lot of folks, which I'm really appreciative of. But ultimately, the opportunity to showcase Division III and the D3 finals as part of this event, I think is a great opportunity for us, and I really think it's going to pay off dividends in terms of raising the awareness of Division III athletics in a way that I'm really excited about.
When we talked a year ago, there were obviously a lot of questions. They were still trying to finalize exactly the details, the tournament structure, et cetera, and obviously it got dragged out just a little bit. But overall, the impressions that you have gotten from people about what this is, obviously we have not seen the game as of yet, but your overall impressions that you've received from people.
It's been really positive so far. The feedback that we've heard from the participating teams, the informal feedback so far, obviously we'll take a lot of time after this is over to get formal feedback from the participants. But so far, the informal feedback we've heard has been really positive, both from Amherst and Mary Hardin-Baylor. If last night's salute event is any indication, Division II and Division III are being prominently included in these events, and that's really what our ultimate goal was to be sure that we weren't lost in what's a very large and very important event. And so far, the feedback has been just the opposite. Division III is receiving prominent mention, and we're really grateful for that and excited about it.
I know the players have been excited about little tiny things like the police escorts to and from locations being included in the dinner, etc. It definitely seems like, not overly, but certainly an effort to make sure that they're getting the same treatment that the D1 guys get every time.
Yeah, and again, looking at the salute event last night as an example, the D3 teams were introduced on stage just like the D1 teams were. The D3 institution logos was featured along with the D1 and D2 institution logos. When you walked into the auditorium, they had placards that displayed all of the prior champions every year from all the previous Final Fours, and as well as for each of the Division II and Division III champions displayed in each year. So we're not being lost in this event so far. We're being prominently featured, and that's something that we were really hopeful for and are excited about.
We've talked about attendance for the game just haphazardly. I've said on the record many times that if we hit 5,000, I'm happy, because at least that's the number or better than what we've seen in Salem on some of the bigger occasions. If we see 10,000, I'll be ecstatic, and there's the potential certainly to see 10,000 because the game is free. But if it's under 5,000, if it's 2,000 or 3,000 people, I think there's a little bit of a worry that that's going to be our disappointment. What are your expectations from everything you've been hearing?
Well, I think the timing for us is good at 12:30 on Sunday. There aren't a lot of other events going on. The events schedule sort of picks up as the weekend goes on, as that Sunday schedule evolves. I'm optimistic because I think we have a good time frame. I wouldn't want to judge the experience simply by the number of fans who show up for the game, however. But I am optimistic that we're going to have a good attendance on Sunday.
Now, to flip the coin a little bit, we talked a year ago about the fact that there was a thought that this should be reciprocated on the women's side as well, that this experience on the men's side should also be honored on the women's side of things. What's the latest there? Stevens Point only has a one-year contract for next year's Final Four. Normally those are two-year things. There's certainly indications that is the direction everybody's headed, but is there a timeline in place? Is there expectation in place?
No timeline yet. The commitment in principle is there that we need some kind of comparable recognition and experience for our women, and I'm confident that that will happen, but we really haven't identified a specific date that makes the most sense. If you think about the selection of this date, for the men, obviously it coincides with the 75th anniversary of the men's championship. We don't have a similar kind of event coming up in the near future for the women, and so we need to find a date that makes sense, that's appropriate, but the commitment to have a comparable experience for our women was very clearly articulated by our President's Council and Management Council, and I'm confident that that will happen.
Should we read into anything that Stevens Point only got a 1 year? Is that trying to set up something in an odd year format here, that Stevens Point gets a year, then there's going to be another 2 year, or is there anything to read into that?
Not to my knowledge, no. I wouldn't read too much into that. I just think that's the way that the bid cycles have been playing out. There's been, I think, a conscious effort throughout all of our championships to look at our bid cycles and to reassess how those are being offered and awarded, and I think that's really, with basketball, just part of that broader overview and sort of resetting of our bid process.
Speaking of bids, it seems like there's a bit of a transition taking place. Obviously, Salem has hosted the men's Final Four for years. A number off the top of my head escapes me, but I know it's been a very long time. On the women's side, we've gotten now into the every 2 year, for the most part, process. Hope, then Illinois Wesleyan, back to Hope. Now it's going to Stevens Point. We've been in a process with that. But soccer, for example, San Antonio seems to be developing into a home. Baseball, developing into a little bit of a home. Is there a sense of trying to create now maybe a location that is the goal, kind of like a Salem on the men's side? Or is it just happenstance that it's, a location is putting together 2 year bids that are good and no one's able to maybe take those bids away?
Well, I think when you talk about where the championships take place, ultimately you want to conduct those championships at locations that maximize the student-athlete experience. And first and foremost, that's really what we're trying to accomplish. If you look at places like Salem that have such an established track record of hosting championships, they deliver such a good experience for our student-athletes that sometimes if it's not broke, you don't want to fix it kind of approach, I think, which we see articulated by our sport committees. Where we go ultimately is a function of the sport committees and their recommendation to the championships committee and on up to our management council and president's council. That process will remain, but we really, I think, need to recognize and give deference to the judgment of our sports committees when it comes to trying to identify what are the locations that work best. It may be that for some sports you see certain locations consistently delivering, they get deference on a longer term basis, whereas other locations may have a kind of experience that encourages different locations on a rotational kind of basis. So I really think it's important to make those decisions on a sport specific basis, and that seems to be the approach that we're taking.
Speaking with Dan Dutcher, Vice President for the Division III in the NCAA. Let's transition a little bit. A lot of changes on the horizon in Division III. We start with regional realignment in 2 years, but also changes to regional structure in regional games next year across the board. Essentially, all games count as long as you play 70% of your games in region. Tell me a little bit about that evolution. I'm sure there's still questions to be solved and answered in the summer here before we really enter that next fall, but is everything really set for that? Are there still some loopholes trying to be closed?
Yeah, I think it's been a very long and a very detailed review process where we've really had to rely on our sports committees first and foremost, and then our championships committee to really work out what are the appropriate regional alignments in the various sports. So we've sort of had a two-pronged approach where we've reassessed what are the appropriate regional alignments, and at the same time, as you referenced, we've increased from 50 to 70% the minimum number of contests that have to take place within region. We're still defining region pretty broadly, so it's any institution that's within your conference, that's within your geographic region, or within that 200-mile radius. Right. Another concept that's receiving review is the idea that even if you don't meet any of those first three criteria, an institution that's within a contiguous state could also be considered to be within region.
My next question. I was
so
go to that.
You know, that's another concept that's under review. I don't think we'll probably ever be fully settled on reviewing what's the most appropriate way to deal with that regional concept. But I would go back to the principle that's in our philosophy statement that says in Division III, primary emphasis on competition is supposed to be on regional and conference competition. That's really fundamental for Division III. That's the way to emphasize local competition to minimize missed class time. And that principle, I think, is what we ultimately need to be sure that we keep in mind when we review all of these other options about, in practice, how to put that principle into play.
Another question regarding regional games that's been brought up many times by fans is a scenario with the MIA, for example, in Michigan, of dealing with not being able to get that 200 miles because a darn lake is in their way of trying to play some teams, but using the line, and so a game in Illinois would automatically count, or a game in Wisconsin would automatically count, even if they have to travel more than 200 miles around the lake. Are those kinds of proposals also on the table?
That's a good example of the kind of flexibility that we would probably continue to want to explore when it comes to revising and refining those definitions. That's where you have to really look and rely on the expertise of your sports committees and the championships committee to make the ultimate call. But there are examples that make sense. We don't want to close our door to those.
Of course, the other thing about regional games next year is all games really will count towards regional rankings and et cetera, as long as they play that 70%. So we are starting to see expansion of at least allowing teams to have good contests, or any contests really, across the board, as long as they're still keeping the regional mentality.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. For years, we've heard some folks who have sort of advocated this concept we call a game is a game, which would have basically done away with any regional consideration. When you look at, again, the philosophy statement that emphasizes that regional concept I certainly didn't feel, and I think the governance structure felt it wasn't appropriate to completely do away with any kind of regional requirement. But the new policy that's being implemented, I think, really sets a nice approach, because it retains overall emphasis on regional competition, but it does, beyond that 70%, give you an opportunity to play other contests that you might feel it's appropriate for your institution to play without sacrificing your championship's access. So this new concept, it's the result, again, of a lot of review and a lot of discussion over the last couple of years, and I think we've landed in a pretty good place, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in practice.
Per regional realignment, we know it's going to be, it's coming in a year, and we know what those, I know it's been years of coming together, but my question is, why isn't that being instituted maybe next fall? It's not so shockingly different. The games are now open to be played all over. You just have to play 70% in region. Well, for most of these shifts, they were already going to be getting to that point anyway from where they're located. Why isn't that a quicker decision? One of the conferences is already shifting next year. Why couldn't we just do it across the board?
I think the delay, my guess is, it was probably designed to try to accommodate situations where schedules have already been established, and to give folks some lead time in scheduling based on the new criteria, recognizing that some of next year's schedules in many sports may have already been put in place.
Sure. Of course, that will come, but obviously it's ever changing. We got the regional realignment coming. Are we done, or is this always a moving thing that we could in a couple of years go, listen, we still need to make some adjustments?
You know, I think around the edges you're always going to have individual requests to committees for consideration of adjustments. I would say the comprehensive review is probably over and done and will be in place for a significant period of time. But again, we never want to close the door to potential recommendations and adjustments that enhance our student-athlete experience and make sense.
Of course, part of regional realignment is because Division III continues to grow and doesn't seem to be ending. We still see an influx of schools every year. More schools are applying to become. A couple questions about growth. First and foremost, are we at a point, I think I've asked this before, that we're maybe getting too big, or are we still comfortable with the size and where the future is?
You know, the growth has not been as robust as it was in the last decade.
Sure.
For example, we're probably on track now to be at about 447 or so schools when you count our actives and our provisionals. It's interesting to note that over the last couple of years, we've had a handful of schools that have actually decided to leave Division III, either because they've dropped their sports program, like Spelman, or they've decided to pursue the Division II model instead. When you go back to the middle of the last decade, when we were trying to project how large the division would be, we actually talked about being as large as 480 schools by 2020. I don't think we'll get there. I think those projections may have been a little too aggressive. We haven't seen as much growth as we thought we would see at that time. But I think the fundamental point regarding your question remains important. We continue to grow. We need to be sure that we accommodate that in the most appropriate way. I don't get a sense from our membership that folks feel that we've become too big. I think that the primary concern I hear articulated by our members is we're comfortable with being as big as folks want to get, provided that the institutions that join us are committed to the Division III philosophy. Sure. If they're a good fit philosophically, if they're a good fit practically when it comes to sports sponsorship and on the legislative commitments, that's just fine. That's appropriate. D3 can be a Big Ten as long as everyone's committed to the same principles.
Of course, there's also growth in sports. Basketball, not necessarily. When new schools come in, certainly that adds to sports. Right. But, for example, men's and women's lacrosse is growing quite a bit in Division III. Almost, it seems like every day I hear about another school who's going to be adding a program in the next year or two, or bringing in a club sport to make it intercollegiate. Have you been surprised by any of the sports growths? Have you been surprised by any of the sports lack of growth, maybe?
You know, I think it's really interesting how Division III institutions added sports during the last 5 or 6 years, even though the economy was challenged. And it's important to note in Division III how many institutions sponsor sports for enrollment and retention purposes. The fact that so many students in Division III are student athletes, the average, being around 20%, but at many schools it's 30% and more. The recognition by many schools that sport can really serve a positive role in attracting students to the institution and keeping them at the institution. So I think that's why you'll see institutions adding sports and being very comfortable with the role that athletics plays at their institution, even in a tough economic environment.
Talking with Dan Dutcher, Vice President for Division III, the NCAA. We're at Emory University here on Final Four weekend in Atlanta, and we'll explain why we're here in Emory in just a moment. But let me get to a couple of the nitty-gritty type stuff. New Jersey has been a big focus for the NCAA, obviously, with the passing of sports gambling legislation by the state. Of course, it's been in and out of the court system, and as of last check, and I could be wrong, but I believe the NCAA has lifted the ban on tournament games being played in New Jersey, having the fact that New Jersey lost its appeal, or somebody lost its appeal in federal court. Though the process isn't over yet. I mean, we know there probably is another appeal process coming. This could go as high as the Supreme Court since it's a federal issue. Is this going to be one of these games where if, let's say, the next round New Jersey wins, then we put the mandate back in place that there's no tournament games? Or are they, let's start with that first.
Well, I think it's important to note that the executive committee policy that applies in this case is really what we're following. And that policy really emphasizes that we will not award championships to states that permit sports gambling.
Right.
The scenario that's played out so far in New Jersey, it's not unlike the scenario that played out several years ago in Delaware, where Delaware adopted legislation that attempted to establish a sports book. That legislation, I want to emphasize, is contrary to federal legislation. The litigation reinforced the fact, based on court rulings, that yes, the state legislation was inconsistent with federal legislation. And in the Delaware scenario, that reached a definitive end where the state did not appeal that decision. We followed a very similar scenario so far with the New Jersey legislation. The federal legislation is clear that New Jersey is not eligible to adopt a sports book.
Just for the record, they had the opportunity a year after the law was passed to put it in place and would have been exempt. But they did not choose that, so that's why we're in this boat now.
And beyond when New Jersey did adopt the legislation, it was contrary to federal legislation. The NCAA was joined by several of the professional sporting associations, leagues, and litigated that fact. The court most recently has reached a definitive statement that that's not appropriate. I don't know where the state will go next, and certainly they might decide to appeal that decision. But the reason why our leadership felt that New Jersey could again sponsor championships was, at this point, the litigation seems to have reached a definitive point. Now, if an additional round of litigation is triggered, that might call into question whether we've reached an endpoint on this discussion, and if so, I would imagine that New Jersey's opportunity to New Jersey institutions and their opportunity to host will probably become another item of discussion.
I know there's been discussion in Division III that the President's Council could very well go to the NCAA should a ban be put back in place. Go, listen, this is maybe too harsh on at least Division III student athletes where no games are being bet on, et cetera, et cetera. You've pulled some tournaments out of here already. We've seen some teams have to be creative to be able to, quote-unquote, host a game. Have you heard of anything where the President's Committee and Council would be possibly presenting something to the executive group saying, listen, can we at least look at where this is really being effective and where it's not?
I have not, and certainly institutions could ask the executive committee to review any aspect of the current executive committee policy. But at the same time, I think it's important to note the executive committee works on behalf of the entire association. The policy right now covers the entire association. Would it make sense to develop a division-specific policy? I'm wondering whether that would be a wise move in the minds of the executive committee.
Of course, Division I NCAA has been under attack a lot. Investigations that haven't worked out well. We won't go into all the details. Other things that have happened in Division I has certainly raised questions, and people have attacked the NCAA. Are you feeling that in the Division III level, that some of the stuff is trickling down in some senses? Have there been any issues? I know we've had some minor ones in Division III, relatively speaking. Is there any pressure in Division III or any negative look at the NCAA because of what's going on above you?
Well, I think it's always important to note that folks who aren't NCAA insiders, if you will, folks who aren't directly involved in athletics administration, folks in the general public, for example, tend to paint with a very broad brush.
Sure.
They don't necessarily understand that there are even 3 divisions, let alone how those divisions are identified and what makes them distinct. And so for many folks, any kind of negative publicity or criticism that's levied at the NCAA, in their minds, applies to all 1,000 NCAA schools and conferences, and Division III can be affected by that. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for Division III to try to better define its identity. That's one of the reasons why we launched the Division III Identity Initiative several years ago. That's why we remain committed to it. We think it's really important for folks to understand what Division III is about, what makes it unique, what distinguishes it from the other divisions. It remains a focal point for us from a strategic perspective, as well as in terms of where we're allocating our resources. I won't say the work is done. There's a lot of work in front of us. We can't accomplish that goal simply through the national office. That's a goal that can only be accomplished through the combined efforts of our entire Division III membership, all 445 of our member institutions, all of our athletics administrators, all of our conference commissioners. Together, we need to do a better job of articulating what the division is about, what makes us unique, and that's important. That's important for us for many reasons.
I think another concern that a lot of people have, or not concern, but certainly a question, we see a lot of money, especially from the D1 basketball tournament, that comes into the NCAA. We know that D3 gets a percentage of it, but it sometimes feels like that percentage isn't being met, or we don't know where all the money goes. I'm not asking for a budgetary item here, but is there a thought of expanding how much money Division III gets? It's a very small percentage of that big contract. Is there ever ways of showing how that money is being allocated to Division III in some sense?
Well, we get 3.18%.
It's less than I thought it was.
Off the top of the annual NCAA revenue. We get it off the top. It's constitutionally guaranteed. I think it's important to note, when I say constitutionally guaranteed, that means any change in that allocation would have to be approved by the entire NCAA membership, right, not just Division III. It's not a figure that we have autonomy over. But keep in mind, 3.18%, because the NCAA pie is so large, that 3.18% slice is still about $25 million this year. We spend about 75% of our budget to fund our championships program, and then the other 25% for our non-championship initiatives. $25 million is a lot of money. I would never say we wouldn't take more, but the reality is that the $25 million really provides our opportunity to conduct a robust championships program, very significant non-championship initiatives. We're very pleased with the opportunities that it presents for us, and I don't think it probably is just realistic to talk about any kind of change in that allocation at this point.
It'd be nice, though, if you mentioned those numbers. 5% would just even sound great. Well, now, of course, we are at Emory University. Again, Vice President of Division III, Dan Dutcher, joining me here. And we're at Emory because, one of the great things that I know Division III has embraced in the last few years and in gangbusters is community service, and especially Special Olympics. We're about to have an opportunity where the two teams, Amherst and Mary Hardin-Baylor, are going to be participating in an event here. This is something we're all familiar with in Salem. We are starting to see it certainly grow in other locations and other championships. But how important has this been for Division III?
Well, I think it's just been a great partnership with Special Olympics. For us, it's really been a great experience. When we talk about what Division III is supposed to be about and what the Division III student-athlete athlete experience is supposed to be about. Of course, we always emphasize success in the classroom, first and foremost, and success on the playing field as well. But for our Division III student athletes, we want them to have opportunities for success in a third venue, and that's through community service, co-curricular and extracurricular activities. For Special Olympics, our student athletes have really embraced that as our official community service partner because of the educational value it provides. Yeah. Obviously, it provides an educational value to the Special Olympic athletes, but all of our feedback tells us it provides just as much, if not more, of an educational value to the student athletes who participate. Really thrilled to say we've had over 250,000 hours dedicated to support Special Olympics by our Division III student athletes. We've conducted Special Olympic activities now at every Division III championship. The message that it sends to our student athletes and to the public really is consistent with what we say Division III is about, and that is to be involved in the community, to learn through athletics participation, to focus on a collegiate experience that is broad-based. Those are values that are consistent for Division III and that are consistent with the Special Olympics organization. They're an incredible organization to work with. They exist in every state. They're very organized. They're very enthusiastic. They make it easy for our member institutions and our student athletes to be involved. Couldn't be more delighted with how that partnership has evolved over time, and to have our two final teams here today to be involved, it just really, I think, puts a nice capstone on the activities this weekend.
And it's really part of that YD3, the hashtag that has certainly gained notoriety in the last few years. And obviously there's other community service events that take place, awareness for cancers and other things that take place that really have been also the true YD3. So it seems like Special Olympics is kind of the base for a much bigger scope of community service, being aware of your community and giving back, which seems interesting considering the student athletes aren't getting scholarships to play. They're not taking anything necessarily from the schools. They're giving to the schools, and they're also giving to the community. It seems like a very interesting relationship.
It really is a great relationship, and I think it helps to reinforce the kind of educational experience we want our student athletes to have. It's an educational experience that you derive from participating in intercollegiate athletics, from participating in community service and campus kinds of activities, as well as in the classroom. That's how our Division III student athletes learn. That's the essence of the Division III experience. You and I have talked about before, we don't conduct athletics in Division III because it makes money or because it provides public entertainment. We really provide those athletic programs because of the educational value it provides to our student athletes. And it's important to emphasize that educational opportunity that exists outside of the classroom, off the playing field. It helps to position our student athletes to become good citizens and leaders after their collegiate career is over, and that's the kind of learning that Special Olympics activity can provide.
The future of the YD3 initiative is, what do you guys have hopes and goals in mind?
You know, we continue to give emphasis to it. It remains a priority in our strategic positioning platform. In terms of allocating resources, it remains a priority for us. It just remains important for us to continue to tell the D3 story because it's such a strong and powerful story, and it's going to remain a top priority for us.
We said at the beginning this was a state of D3. What is the state of D3 if you were giving your state of the state, as it were, or your Mark Emmert press conference, so it's just me asking questions?
Well, you know, I don't want to steal too much thunder from our management council and president's council, but we conducted our first division-wide survey this past spring. It's the first one we've conducted in 5 years. And I can tell you that I think the state of the division is really very good. We asked folks about philosophical issues. We asked them about legislative standards. We asked them about our various programs and services, communication, the governance structure. Across the board, feedback was really very positive. Folks seem to be happy with where we're at as a division. They believe that we're backing up our philosophical principles in practice. They're pleased with how we operate as a division from a representative standpoint, and that's really important because ultimately the NCAA in Division III, it's a representative member association. We need to be sure that we're our actions are consistent with the will of our membership. The feedback has really been encouraging so far. We're still compiling the results of the survey, but the preliminary results are supportive of the concept that D3 is in a good place. And we just want to review those results, see what we're doing well, see where we can improve, and commit to doing that moving forward.
He is Dan Dutcher, Vice President for Division III for the NCAA. As you know, I always give my guests the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be watching?
I would just encourage all of folks who are out there to not hesitate to be advocates for the division. Division III is doing a lot of things right. It's a great model. Don't hesitate to take advantage of those opportunities to tell the D3 story and be proud of your association with Division III.
I think we've committed ourselves to doing this yearly, so we're going to have to find out where we cross paths in the next year as well. Again, Dan Dutcher, Vice President for Division III at the NCAA. Appreciate you taking the time to do so. And we'll have plenty more from Atlanta throughout the weekend, so stay logged on to d3hoops.com. And once again, thanks to Dan Dutcher, Vice President for Division III for the NCAA, for taking the time, for giving us his state of Division III. We're going to have to find a way to do this every year, as it is certainly an enjoyable conversation to have with him, our second time doing so in as many years. When we come back, Pat Coleman and Gordon Mann join me once again with their thoughts on the season and their final thoughts on the 2012-2013 season. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Back from Atlanta after this.
Division III schools offer academic scholarships instead of athletic scholarships. This really puts the focus that the student athlete needs to maintain that GPA.
I did receive a non-athletic scholarship upon entering school.
I got the presidential scholarship, which was huge for me.
I think there's more opportunities for academic scholarships in Division III. A lot of people pick schools just based on the sport and don't get that experience.
Being a Division III athlete and developing my leadership skills has definitely put my name out there and helped me get more recognition on campus, but more recognition nationwide. I did win the Jostens Trophy, which is based on leadership, academics, and then how well you do on the court.
I'm also the Schwartz Scholar of my class. Schwartz Scholarship is basically a scholarship that is given to a student who's identified as a likely leader.
At the end of the day, it won't matter how they play on the field, it will matter how they do in the classroom.
And welcome back to Hoopsville. Once again, Dave McHugh, now rejoined again by Gordon Mann and Pat Coleman as we wrap up the 2012-2013 men's basketball season. Remember, we already did that in the women's side. It feels like a month ago at the DeWeese Center, though it was darn close. Let's look at the season that was. Let's start on some of the positive notes of the season. Certainly was an exciting one, and I think my first positive is we had a lot of parity.
Yeah, we did. I mean, for me, obviously, the first positive is the thing we've spent most of the last hour talking about. So, obviously, granted that. But, yeah, you're right. And it was one of those years where, you kind of start with not a great picture of who we think was going to be in the tournament. You remember, think back to who our top couple of teams were when the season started.
MIT was number one.
MIT was up there. Virginia Wesleyan was up there. But as the season wore on, we really kind of got the feeling that there were probably 8 to 10, maybe 11, maybe as low as 15. And then Mary Hardin-Baylor, for goodness sake, comes out from not even in the top 40 and comes in and makes the national championship game. So that's the thing that there's one thing that people talk about in Division III football, for example, that in a lot of senses, for the previous 7 years when it was Mount Union or Wisconsin Whitewater, that to them it was boring. And to me, that was the least boring it was, because before Whitewater came along, it was seeming like a foregone conclusion that Mount Union was going to win the national championship more often than not. To me, I don't care if it's the same two teams over and over again. It could have been Whitewater and Cabrini again this year. For all I cared, it would have been just fine. As long as there was some suspense at the end and we didn't know who the national champion was going to be. For us this time around, we went through the last 8 to 10 weeks thinking that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the parity is also being seen on the women's side just a little bit more as well. Gordon, some of the things that you look back on the basketball season all these 6.5 months and remember positively.
The teams that I remember, as you think back and you try and extricate yourself from this weekend, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I know.
I remember the schools that probably aren't going to do what they did this time around. And I think about the opportunity that Dickinson had to host an NCAA tournament. Now, they may host another NCAA tournament. They've got enough pieces coming back to be the favorites in the Centennial. But here's a school that had not been able to host a tournament, had not won a meaningful tournament game ever. And in the first 5 minutes, between the warm-ups to the first 5 minutes of the game, the students at Dickinson were so amped up and were so excited and were so dressed in funny outfits and so into the game that when Marietta came out to warm up, the Marietta kids had a big smile on their face because they were enjoying the atmosphere right before Dickinson blew them out of the water. They didn't enjoy that so much, but they were enjoying the atmosphere as well. And when a kid for Dickinson hit a three and just ran down the court with this giant grin on his face, and then when they won and the students stormed the court, waited in Division III style, and then patiently walked onto the court and celebrated. Those are really cool moments. And for the kids that had this moment here this weekend, for Williamson with the dunk, and for Toomey with the passes, and for the cutting of the nets, and even for the Mary Hardin-Baylor kids, those are memories they'll never forget. Some of the memories that people will never forget didn't happen on the biggest stage, but they're still the ones that are, when I think back and I go, oh, remember that? That was really cool. And the Dickinson moment for me sort of encapsulated that.
Of course, the Workman missed free throw for a layup to force a third overtime against Middlebury. Second time that had happened in Middlebury this season. Wesleyan had done that. To them both times. That one's going to stick out to me. And of course, the inaugural Hoopsville Classic and another great D3 Hoops Classic in Las Vegas. Certainly things I will keep in mind as well. I know I kind of threw a curveball on you when I said parity, but is there anything else that jumped out at you as positives?
I think one of the other schools, in addition to what Gordon mentioned about Dickinson, fantastic story, by the way, for them. I think also Wesley, when we ever talk about Wesleyan men's basketball, and they go to Williams, and this is, something that's forgotten. I think about the Major League Baseball playoffs that are so long. You ever think about the wild card team that got eliminated in 3 games in the first, NBA, on Tuesday afternoon on ESPN 7. Those are teams you don't really think about. And this tournament was so long, you could have had some of those as well. But I thought, Wesley coming out and having the kind of season that they did, and going up and giving Williams a fantastic game is another one of those stories. It's really, destined to be forgotten by 400-some schools, but long remembered at Wesley.
Absolutely. Of course, Randolph-Macon, by the way, a team that had taken its fair share of really good opponents, seemingly not going to be making it, make a great tournament run themselves.
And Morrisville State, which by the time this is on the air will probably be a top 25 program for the first time ever. I mean, this is one of these completely off the radar schools that may very well go right off the radar, and we may not hear from them again.
They bring back a lot of pieces.
They do, but kudos to the guys at Morrisville State.
Absolutely. The Cinderella's shoe fit very nicely this year in men's basketball. Of course, every year we have moments we kind of take a back or question. Anything that jumps out at you that you kind of look back on the season and go, that was disappointing?
Well, I mean, we kind of beat this to death earlier, but the structure of the NCAA tournament, the way it was bracketed, was certainly not ideal. It's kind of more disappointing the more and more I think about it. Not that Whitewater deserved to be here this weekend, but they probably deserve to be in Salem or have a better shot to get there, or Illinois Wesleyan or something like that. But when a team comes from the below the bottom of the ranking and gets to the NCAA tournament, or gets to the Final Four, or gets to the national championship game, it kind of really reminds us that teams that are on the bubble, and not that Mary Hardin-Baylor was on the bubble, but they weren't ranked, so they were ranked by the NCAA. The NCAA had them getting in. But if we had been doing the tournament, maybe they don't get in. It's just a reminder that you got to be really cognizant of those last decisions in the tournament, because those are teams that at the very least can make a run. Maybe they can't always win the national championship, but we got to be really careful about those decisions and make sure that we're getting the right teams in.
So it goes to the Hamlin situation. Unfortunately, was one that we really didn't want to have attention on. I think it was handled the best they probably could handle it. Who knows? We'll see what the future is for that program. But that was a light we certainly didn't want shined in any way, shape, and form on basketball. Any other ones that come out to your mind?
This was a weird year, Dave, where a bunch of programs didn't make it through the year. Piedmont did not make it through the Christmas vacation. Not a school school we will ever talk about on the men's side because they don't have a men's program, and we'll never talk about them on the women's side either. Mount Mary didn't make it through the year, and Spelman won't see another year. It's kind of ironic that we're wrapping up this tremendous experience, and not too far from here, there's a program that's pretty much in hospice, and it's an interesting story, and the reasons the athletic program went away from that. But for the kids who were in that program, for the athletes, for the kids who are at Piedmont, who were seniors and were thinking maybe I'll get to have that special run. For the kid who was at Mount Mary, for the girl who grew up playing basketball and was looking forward to that senior day moment with her parents. For the junior who decided to come to Spelman 3-4 years ago because competitive college basketball was something that she was passionate about. Those are stories that those are losses, and those are painful, and thankfully we don't have those too many years.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a fascinating season to be sure. We have some changes coming next year. We've heard it already with Dan Dutcher and Mike DeWitt. We've alluded to it a lot here. Remember, all games count next year. As long as you play 70% of your games in region, that is going to change the criteria. A lot of the secondary criteria will now become primary criteria. How they determine a lot of those things, a lot of meetings to be determined. Mike DeWitt says now on the agenda also, can they add another regional ranking? Pat, it's going to be a fascinating offseason. And by the way, we haven't even gotten to regional realignment, which in the grand scheme of things isn't shocking or alter changing of things. But we have a lot that's going to change not only for basketball, but across Division III.
Well, I think that, the one thing that we, those of us who are the Division III geeks, and I know the people who are watching this time of year, there's a lot of diehards too.
Yeah.
So I get that. We tend to get caught up in those sorts of things. The thing that I think is great about the way the primary criteria are changing is that it just makes it much more easy to understand.
Absolutely.
For 99% of the schools, a game against a Division III opponent is going to count in your primary criteria, which is as it should be, frankly.
Right.
We're making this long, slow march, and maybe we're almost done with it now from, where we were 10 years ago, where your regional games, the games that counted in your primary criteria, were only the Mid-Atlantic against Mid-Atlantic games. So you could only play those other 54 teams. And, if you had to go 250 miles from, middle of Virginia to play somebody in northern New Jersey, that was a regional game, and you had to bypass all of those other teams in New Jersey and Delaware and such on the way to get there. That didn't make any sense. So we added 200 miles, and we added the administrative region, and those sorts of things. And I think, and I hope that we're finally done. We'll take a look and see what the schedules look like this offseason. Maybe we don't need to add adjacent states. I think that the conferences that are most in trouble with this would be the MIAA, but to be honest with you, it's just 70%. You get most of the way to that just by playing your conference schedule and playing some conference tournament games. I think we're going to be in pretty safe stead there, and I just think I think it's great. It's long overdue. How long have we been hearing coaches saying it should be a game is a game? That's shorthand for what we're talking about.
Right.
And it should be. If you play a game, it should count, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. And again, more changes coming in conferences. As we speak, the Landmark has announced they're grabbing one more. There's speculation they could do more. There's still speculation other conferences could change in the future. Who knows, over the summer or into the next year.
And there will be some changes in alignments next year. A couple of schools change hands in Texas.
Yep.
And winds continue to shift.
Yep. And of course, the AMCC actually jumps the regional year by one. The AMCC will actually jump into the Great Lakes while everybody waits for one more year to make their moves. Again, changes coming, and it doesn't affect just men's basketball or women's basketball, but these are positive changes to be sure, though it'll probably take a little growing pains to get used to some things.
Yeah, I think Pat had it right. You want to make the selection criteria as much as possible intuitive, and intuitive means different things in different places. You want a game to be a game. You don't want to set up artificial. You want to create barriers that are. You want to create a structure that's respectful of teams who don't have the budget or don't want to travel, hundreds of miles to play games. But for those who have to or want to, you want to give them the flexibility to do that without punishing them by giving them a negative incentive to go out and play those games. And the American Southwest Conference is one that's going to really benefit from this 70% because they play a lot of their games against each other. One of the other conferences that probably won't is the Northwest Conference, which plays a lot of their non-conference games against the Walla Wallas and Corbins and Life Pacifics of the world. I'm not sure. It's hard to get at those schools and say, without lowering the threshold to, okay, it's 60%, it's
You gotta draw the line
50%, there's not a good way to get the SCIAC teams enough games to get that, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Absolutely.
I'll see your Corbin, and I'll raise you a Concordia Portland.
Oh, here we go. Of course, some things we'll keep an eye on out of the men's basketball committee. How they will they have to make any adjustments to the multiplication number that they love so much? They're going to be talking to the NCAA stats crew about that. See what happens with that, because essentially it got wiped out this year. Thanks to our mathematician friends for figuring that out. Also, will they get their way and at least make the final regional rankings public? Don't hold your breath. And of course, do we get maybe an extra regional ranking along the way as well? Guys, as we wrap things up here at the show, not completely, but from your points of view, I'd love to get your final thoughts on the season in general. Gordon, we'll start with you.
Well, I'll keep it short and simple. Congratulations to Amherst. It was a great season. They were a great team. They were deserving champions, and congratulations.
Very well put. Pat, your final thoughts.
Wow, you didn't give me a whole lot of time,
No, you
did
did
you?
not.
I'd like to order it with the ice cream on the side. Yeah, I think one of the great things about this season, again, we've alluded to it now. We've flat out said it was really wide open. We had a lot of great seniors last year. Every year, it's kind of this, I don't know, not quite a wake-up call, but just kind of a level set when the season starts. For us, the season never really ends, but you really start thinking about it in mid-September or so. You got to go back and who's going to be the preseason All-Americans. You look at the All-Americans from the year before. It's like, I think of those 25 guys last year, 20 of them might have been seniors. It really was kind of a harbinger for what was to come. That we were going to have, some new teams, some new faces, maybe some teams that had been there traditionally or had down years might bounce back. St. Thomas was one of them. They come off, they defend their championship in kind of a disappointing manner. 4 seniors graduated, another one got hurt, and they got all the way back to the national semifinals this year. Did we expect a whole lot out of Amherst or Williams at the beginning of the season? I know Middlebury was one of the teams in contention for number 1 spot on my ballot in the preseason. Williams wasn't ranked at the beginning of the year, and Amherst was ranked a little bit lower. But it's just a reminder of if you have a great senior class and you go deep into the tournament, there's probably also someone who's on the bench, either a junior who's playing 15 minutes a game or a sophomore who's playing maybe 5 minutes a game, who's certainly capable of stepping up and continuing that. That is how programs reload instead of rebuild. Not to use the overused cliche, but that is that is the way those things happen. So if you had a disappointing year this year, and you're watching the show here in April, first of all, thank you. Kudos, congratulations, and thank you for watching the show in April if you had a disappointing year. But have hope. If you've done well in the past, it is so much easier to do well in the future. If you have you have lots of great coaches in Division III, lots of great traditions in Division III. We love to celebrate those things, and we love to see those things continue to come back to the fore. And then some of the programs that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago who come up, kind of come out of nowhere or come back. They really make Division III what it is. It's this rich tapestry of stories that we all love to tell and we all love to follow. And this season might be over, but the good news is that this is the shortest off season we'll have in basketball. So we'll be back at it in not too long.
Oh, great. You had to put it that way. You were just ready for a break, and it looks like we won't even get one. Well, congratulations again to Amherst. Thanks to Pat Coleman and Gordon Mann for joining me here. When we come back on Hoopsville, I'll give you my final thoughts and a final rant on the season as well. As great as this was in Atlanta for the Division III student athletes, it may not have been as great for the Division III fans, especially at home. More Hoopsville when we come back with my final thoughts. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Back after this.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Once again, welcome back to Hoopsville again in Atlanta as we wrap up the season here. Again, thanks to Gordon Mann and Pat Coleman. Also want to thank Mary Hardin-Baylor's Thomas Orr and, of course, Ken DeWeese. I want to thank Amherst's Aaron Toomey, Alan Williamson, and, of course, Dave Hixon for joining us on the show today. And, again, also Dan Dutcher, Vice President for Division III, and Mike DeWitt, a head coach at Ohio Wesleyan and Men's Basketball Committee Chair. Want to wrap up first. I want to go with a rant, and then we'll go with my final thoughts and thanks on the show. First and foremost, my rant. This was an absolutely awesome opportunity for student athletes. I'll be the first to tell you that they did it right here in Atlanta. They treated them like gold. They treated them like D1 athletes. They gave them the same experiences, including autograph sessions in Bracket Town, where the committee made sure that people came and got the signatures from every single student athlete there, including Division II and Division III. It was terrific. But for the fans, especially those at home, Division III got buried. And I hate to be blunt about it, but when the Division II game is on CBS Network and the Division III game is on CBS Sports Network, a channel that most have to have a special sports package to get, it's a disservice to Division III. But furthermore, the game wasn't even available online through NCAA.com. I had been told several weeks ago that the game would be simulcast on NCAA.com for all the fans, because again, Sports Network is not available to all markets. It didn't happen. There was no plan in place, and apparently no one knew about it, including on game day. This isn't fair for Division III. Division II gets a huge crowd and gets games throughout the season on CBS Sports Network. They get a game at 4 o'clock on CBS. Division III is replaced by bull riding on CBS Sports Network, and now the actual network, and we are at 12:30 on a channel hardly anybody can see. Then there are fans everywhere who would have loved to have seen it online and simply couldn't. If we had known in advance, we would have made sure to audio broadcast it, I swear to you. Unfortunately, the plan wasn't in place because we didn't know either. It is a disservice to Division III fans that they were treated by a network or networks as such that they couldn't get the same opportunities Division II. And of course, we all know Division I gets a primetime spot. Under the spotlights, several spotlights on CBS Sports and elsewhere. So I am disappointed that the game couldn't be seen by many of the fans. And there was one heck of a tweet I got of a fan who gave me his picture of the game, and it was a black screen. So here's hoping the Twitter updates from us were good enough, and here's hoping down the road that mistake does not happen again, especially if they bring this game to the Final Four in the future. As we realized earlier, this was probably the least accessible Division III title game in a number of years on so many different platforms. And it's disappointing that it was the one that was in the biggest spotlight here in Atlanta. My final thoughts on the season: congratulations to Amherst and congratulations to Mary Hardin-Baylor. This is a crew team, again, who hadn't gotten votes and certainly earned their way here by playing very good basketball when they had to play good basketball. Both teams put on a terrific show here in Atlanta, and the Lord Jeffs certainly proved that they were the best not only in New England, but in the country, having beaten some very good teams along the way, all from outside of their region. So congratulations to the Lord Jeffs. And thanks to the National Association of Basketball Coaches, who have done a terrific job making sure that we had the opportunity here to do things for you, the fans, as well. And it certainly was enjoyable to be here in Atlanta. And I want to thank them, Paige Moyer, Gary Stewart, and Charlie Brock, who are on the board of directors, who made sure Hoopsville had a location to broadcast on Thursday, and certainly it helped us with everything we needed here as well. Also want to thank the NCAA, Dan Dutcher and others in his office, who made sure that we had some opportunities, like going to Emory University, I should say, to see a wonderful opportunity between the Mary Hardin-Baylor and Amherst teams, and even the Emory men's basketball team, and Special Olympics. Special Olympics is a wonderful thing that I am so happy Division III has embraced, and it was certainly on display at a time when teams are normally focusing on a championship game. It was a welcome distraction for everybody. And of course, again, thanks to those who have helped us throughout the year, including Pat Coleman, Gordon Mann, and others at D3 Hoops. I want to thank all the coaches who came on the show. We have never done this many shows of Hoopsville in all of its tenures, as mini shows, as full seasons, etc. We had more shows from start to finish, and that meant we had more guests from start to finish. And it's not for sports information directors and coaches who are willing to come on, and even players to come on the show. This wouldn't be possible. And I also want to thank my producer, Chris Tarr, who for most of the season was able to help as well. It was a terrific 2012-2013 season. I will certainly not forget checking off a bucket list of coming to a Division I Final Four, and I'm glad I did it because I was covering a Division III basketball game. We'll see what happens coming up, and of course, there's a lot to talk about in the offseason, folks, and we will cross those bridges when we come to them. Stay with us on Twitter and Facebook. We'll keep you abreast of things. D3hoops.com is obviously the website, but Twitter at D3 Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Don't forget Facebook.com/Hoopsville. Email us in the offseason as well, Hoopsville at D3hoops.com. And of course, your home on Twitter is hashtag D3H for absolutely everything. And I would be absolutely, completely insane if I didn't say one special thank you to my wife and children. They haven't seen me a lot in the last 6 weeks. Well, they see me here on the video, but I appreciate them taking the time to make sure to come out and go out of their way to support me. So for my wife and my 3.5-year-old son, Andy, and my 7-month-old, or I should say 3.5-year-old son, Andy, and my 7-month-old daughter, Molly, thank you so much for your support. Daddy is coming home, though probably only for a few weeks. So to everybody out there, again, thank you for tuning into Hoopsville this season. We wouldn't do it without you. Look for changes in the future. We'll see what we can do to improve the show, as we always do in the off-season. Countdown is on. The season starts November 15th. If you're not looking forward to basketball next year, we can understand, but give yourself a month and then start looking forward to it. And of course, we'll kick it off with the Hoopsville Classic once again at Stevenson University, where 5 teams from the NCAA Division III tournament will be on display, including 3 who made it to the Elite 8 in Salem. Also, don't forget about the D3 Hoops Classic in Las Vegas. It is going to be a stellar men's and women's tournament out there as well. Thanks again to everybody who supported the show and supported us by watching. Have a good off season, and maybe try and get out and enjoy the weather. Once again, good night from Atlanta, everybody.